The computer screen flickered wildly, the sound of a keyboard clacking, echoing through the room. Our boy Lu Mingfei was completely immersed in some seriously skilled gameplay with his online best friend. The heated battle in the game was so intense, Minfei actually had to sit up, ready to give it his all. Suddenly, a user named Nono popped up, dropping some seriously sharp and sarcastic remarks about his skills. Curious, Minfei clicked on her profile, only to find it completely blank, shrouded in an unexplainable mystery. Meanwhile, 3 elite students from the prestigious Castle Academy were on a super-secret mission. Their target? An S-rank potential candidate named Lu Mingfei, whom they needed to interview. To get the full scoop on this potential genius, they requested the super AI system Norma to link up some data. The investigation results shocked the entire team. Lu Mingfei was just a private high school student, 1 year below Chu Zihang. At school, he was quiet, had few friends, but possessed an almost ignorantly optimistic vibe. Our guy was perfectly content living in his virtual world, all while secretly crushing on his classmate, Chen Wanwan. Minfei's home life, however, was anything but peaceful. He lived with his uncle's family, where his aunt was constantly nagging him, and his cousin Mingzhe was always bossing him around. To get back at his arrogant cousin, Minfei even created a fake female account, just to flirt and trick him. That's our guy. While all the family money went to Mingzhe's shopping sprees, Minfei was stuck wearing cheap knockoffs. Nono then posed a rather philosophical question. Did someone like him even have dreams? Because people as downtrodden as Minfei usually dream of becoming world-saving heroes. But this dude's dream was so ridiculously simple, it'd make you fall backward. He just wanted to casually sell newspapers all day, as long as he had enough to eat. Hearing that, Ye Sheng almost swerved his car right into the curb. They couldn't believe a prestigious academy would even consider recruiting someone so utterly unmotivated. Minfei dejectedly headed to the post office to pick up his admission results. Holding the flimsy letter, he sighed, thinking he'd probably fallen flat on his face yet again. Just as he was about to head home, the mailman called him back, handing him another envelope that required a signature. Inside was a brand new phone, along with a notice that he'd failed his application to an international school, but also a special invitation from the top-tier affiliated co-academy, complete with a full scholarship. Minfei couldn't believe his eyes. He had to literally slap himself hard to make sure he wasn't dreaming. As soon as he got home, his aunt and uncle jumped up, immediately dismissing it as some sophisticated scam. Cousin Mingzhe even chimed in with some scornful remarks, saying that scholarship was only for elites like Chu Zihang, and Minfei wasn't even worthy of carrying their shoes. Suddenly, a helicopter roared, landing right outside their window, and 4 slick men in black suits and shades stepped out. Chu Zihang boldly walked in, dramatically draping a powerful cloak over Minfei's shoulders, to the utter astonishment of the whole family. Minfei coolly declared, "I am the savior." But yeah, that was all just this dude's wild, overactive imagination playing tricks on him. In reality, the whole family was in a blazing argument, ready to call and complain to the scam artists. Little did they know, when the other end of the line picked up, his aunt's attitude did a complete 180. They had actually invited Minfei to a hotel for an interview the very next morning. That night on the rooftop, Minfei video called Old Tang, his game friend Fang Sha. Old Tang was the only one who showed genuine excitement and cheered him on. The next morning, Minfei arrived at the interview address and was instantly hit with a massive culture shock. It was the most luxurious high-class hotel in the entire city. The opulent splendor made a total country bumpkin like him practically squirm with overwhelm. Stepping into the conference room, he found dozens of eyes instantly fixated on him. The other candidates practically exuded aristocratic charisma, looking utterly high-class, like a different species compared to our boy. Suddenly, Minfei spotted Chen Wanwan, also present at the interview. Seeing her waiting, he boldly approached, sat right next to her, and started making small talk. Wanwan was still the same gentle, radiant goddess, making his heart pound wildly all over again, and he completely forgot his fear of the mysterious interview ahead. The next person called into the interview room was none other than Chen Wanwan. Before she left, Minfei made sure to give her a quick cheer. He then waited outside, keeping watch, and the moment Wanwan stepped out, he anxiously rushed over to ask how it went. But before he could even get an answer, he heard his own name being called for the interview. Under the scrutinizing gaze of Examiner Shu, Minfei suddenly felt a pang of uneasiness. Our boy knows his skills are about to get him yeeted like the rest, so he quickly turns to tell Krat to wait for him so they can leave together. He frantically shoves the door open, but the smile on his face instantly vanishes. What slammed into his eyes were pairs of glowing, hungry golden eyes staring intently at him in the dimly lit open room. Minfei panicked, almost tripping and falling face first. Luckily, Ye Sheng stepped in just in time to steady him. Aki also smiled and walked over to greet him. Minfei, too flustered to speak, could only bow in greeting. As the interview began, Min-Fi was dead set on being asked about why he applied, ready with the elaborate script he'd painstakingly practiced since last night. Little did he know, the earth-shattering question thrown his way was, "Do you believe in aliens?" Min-Fi froze for a full 5 seconds, thinking this question was utterly insane, but still managed to plaster on a fake professional smile in response. Thinking this was a foreign language proficiency test, he immediately rattled off a chaotic, stammering stream of English. Seeing this, Ye Sheng quickly told him to just answer normally. Inside, our boy was boiling with frustration, wanting to cuss out these international school recruiters for asking such a clueless question, especially if they were going to make him answer in his native tongue anyway. What was even the point of the interview then? But once you start something, you gotta see it through. So Min-Fi started giving wild, cheeky answers, perfectly matching the ridiculousness of the question. He thought he was just messing around for fun, but to his surprises, they all seriously bowed their heads and meticulously wrote down every single one of his outrageous fabrications. The following questions just got more and more unruly and silly, so he just decided to answer them with an equally devil-may-care attitude. And yet, the interview panel's demeanor was even more serious and tense than his own. Reaching the end of his patience, Min-Fi decisively grabbed his backpack, stood up, and marched straight out of the room, not even waiting for anyone to kick him out. As soon as he stepped into the hallway, the other noble candidates immediately started sneering, claiming he was the fastest person eliminated in history in a mere 1 minute and 30 seconds. But our boy didn't care. The scholarship could vanish for all he cared. As long as Krat was still standing there, waiting for him to leave together, that was happiness enough. For him right now, he couldn't care less about going to America or the West. All he wanted was to marry Krat someday, and for them to live happily ever after in a small house in this very city. No sooner had Min-Fi left than Professor Jujin and Nono hastily ran to the interview room. Upon hearing Ye Sheng and Aki report that Min-Fi seemed uninterested and had left early, Professor Jen immediately erupted in a fit of rage, scolding the two of them relentlessly. Why didn't you stop him? At the very least, you should have groveled at his feet and begged him to stay. He's the only S-rank student we have. With no other way to appease the raving professor, they had no choice but to call Min-Fi's family directly. Back home, Min-Fi's aunt received a call from the academy's professor, informing her that he had passed the interview and even formally invited the entire family to an intimate dinner. Needless to say, Min-Fi was so utterly shocked upon hearing the news that his jaw almost hit the floor. The next day, the entire Shang family was present at one of the city's most upscale restaurants. The moment Professor Jen saw Min-Fi, he gleefully ran over to shake his hand with fervent enthusiasm. Min-Fi's aunt was initially skeptical, her face showing clear doubt, suspecting a scam. But the very next second, upon hearing the professor promise that the school would provide a colossal monthly scholarship, she did a complete 180, flipping her stance faster than a rice paper pancake, and nodding her head off in agreement. Hearing the teacher praise Min-Fi to the high heavens, everyone in the family was utterly bewildered, barely believing their own ears. Min-Fi sat there, blushing furiously, secretly telling himself that maybe Westerners just had this over-the-top way of praising people to encourage growth. But what truly caught him off guard was when the professor pulled out a photo of his parents, revealing a shocking secret. They were also former outstanding students of this very academy. Even his aunt and uncle, all these years, had no idea his parents had studied at a place like this, because it was a secret pact between the school and the family. With that, the professor gently placed a letter, sent directly from his biological parents, into his hand. For a child like Min-Fi, who had yearned for his parents' warmth and news for far too long, this letter carried an overwhelming emotional impact. While his entire family was happily engrossed in their meal, celebrating the scholarship money, an unpredictable swirl of emotions churned within him. He quietly excused himself to step outside and be alone. Standing there, reading every line from his mother, he learned that she had personally requested the principal to admit him into the academy. All the long-suppressed bitterness and self-pity he'd held within suddenly burst forth. Min-Fi burst into heart-wrenching sobs like a small child. Suddenly, a cold female voice echoed from behind him, reminding him that he was in fact crying in the ladies' restroom. Min-Fi jolted, spinning around to find a dazzling red-haired girl standing with her arms crossed, watching him with an amused look. After that utterly mortifying moment, the girl received orders to bring him back to the dinner table. The professor cheerfully introduced the beautiful young woman as the school's star student. Min-Fi settled into his seat, still flustered and uncertain, idly poking his fork into the pricey steak in front of him. Seeing our boy dawdling, Nono wasn't having any of it. She leaned right over, making herself completely at home, and casually swiped his entire plate of food, proceeding to feast under Min-Fi's utterly dumbfounded gaze. Back at the table, after Nono casually let slip that Min-Fi was still on the fence, Professor Jin instantly looked worried sick, terrified he'd turned down the admission offer. And hearing that great news, his two relatives absolutely saw red, seething and wanting to pounce and devour their nephew whole. Nono, with just one glance, instantly knew his deepest secret. Our boy was just scared that if he went to America, he'd never get to see Tran Van Van again, his secret crush, right? His deepest secret totally laid bare for all the world to see. Minfi immediately turned beet red, shot up from his seat, and stammered out denials to everyone's utter bewilderment. Realizing he'd gone a bit overboard, he awkwardly sank back down, trying to reel in his wild antics. Then out of nowhere, Nono casually brought up their sarcastic gaming spat from the other day, and Minfi's brain cell finally connected. She was that gaming ID. While he was super curious how this girl knew everything about him, Minfi's genuine hesitation was still very much real, all thanks to Van Van. Later that night on the rooftop, Minfi stared up at the sky, letting out a melancholy sigh and wondering if Van Van would even remember him after he was gone. While he was busy wallowing in self-pity, little Nono just poofed into existence right behind him, casually dropping a, "Well, why don't you just go ask her yourself?" Minfi nearly jumped out of his skin, almost tumbling down a dozen stories. He wondered how on earth she even knew to find him up here. Nono haughtily flipped her hair, explaining she just used the flattery positioning system to pinpoint him. She even burst out laughing, teasing him for going full psycho-romantic on the rooftop at midnight, trying to confess his love to his phone. Minfi, being Minfi, immediately started deluding himself, convinced she was just trying to get close because she found him so handsome. Nono instantly doused him with a bucket of cold water, retorting, "Honey, I've got a whole line of guys waiting for me back at school, all right? It's just that Professor Jin literally assigned me the quest to convince you to enroll, so I had to track you down, that's all." Knowing that Tran Van Van was the ultimate plot device holding Minfi back, Nono brutally laid bare the cold, hard truth. "She's just not that into you, dude. Just give up and get to the academy already. You're gonna be heartbroken anyway." Minfi stubbornly craned his neck, insisting he still had a glimmer of hope. Nono sighed with dripping sarcasm. "Oh, really? So have you, given her flowers? Or even, asked her out to a movie yet? You've been crushing on her for this long, but can't even pull off the basics. What hope are you even talking about?" With Nono hitting exactly where it hurt, Minfi finally snapped, yelling at the top of his lungs that he really liked Van Van, to the point he couldn't possibly let go. Just as things were heating up, Nono's phone chimed. It was Professor Genion, relentlessly nagging her and even granting her full-on violent authorization to drag Minfi back to the academy. After hanging up, Nono decided to take a chill pill and grace our boy with a few more words of wisdom about love. She advised him to just bravely go for it and confess once. If it worked, well then the doors to Katso Academy would officially slam shut. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Minfi feeling like he'd just chugged 1,000 energy drinks, absolutely hyped to chase after his love. Back at the office, Professor Juge was practically feral, because Nono still hadn't reported whether Minfi would actually enroll or not. Immediately after today, Ye Sheng and Aki were scheduled to assist Professor La on some critical mission, while he himself had to jet off to another country to urgently interview yet another special student. So the massive responsibility of reeling in Minfi was now entirely riding on Nono's shoulders. Back at the hotel, Nono urgently commanded Noma to hack into the system and dig up every single piece of info on this Tran Van Van character. Meanwhile, Minfi, feeling like all his wishes had just been granted, bravely managed to ask his crush out for an entire day. Just as the atmosphere was getting all cozy and romantically ambiguous, little Nono poofed into existence from absolutely nowhere to ruin the vibe. She deliberately slung an arm around Minfi, acting all super chummy. Seeing this, Van Van got all shy and awkwardly excused herself to leave early. Minfi absolutely lost his mind, tearing into Nono for her thoughtless crime of ruining his once-in-a-millennium date. Unfazed and completely ignoring his rant, Nono looked him dead in the eyes and asked him one last time, "Do you want to join Katso Academy or not? Professor Jing is literally flying out tonight. This is your one and only last shot." After much agonizing thought, Minfi realized that right now, Van Van was still the undisputed MVP of his life. He stubbornly chose to stay put. Nono, completely out of options, just sighed, respected his decision, and then turned and walked away. Back home, Minfi was absolutely fired up, passionately rehearsing his confession speech for his crush tomorrow. He passionately mumbled to himself in front of the mirror, flailing around so much that his cousin, passing by, genuinely thought his older brother had finally lost his marbles. The next day, before heading to their rendezvous at the hall, he went the extra mile to pick dandelions from the roadside. He even meticulously bribed the backstage musician to play a super romantic love song the moment he made his grand entrance. Feeling 100% confident his preparations were flawless, Minfi excitedly waited for his D-Day. Just then, Zhao Manhua, the school's resident heartthrob and drama king, strolls up and hands our boy a black suit, saying, "Oh, by the way, Van Van wants you to dress up a bit fancy tonight." Our boy, still clinging to the idea he was special, suddenly realizes he's just background noise in her story. And right next to him, two other short, chubby dudes are rocking the exact same black suit. Turns out they were all just paid human props, standing there looking important for a little cash, which, honestly, who could say no to? They even shoved Min-Fi onto a pre-marked spot on the floor, specifically a giant Y. Then the stage lights dramatically fade to black. Mustering all 18 years of his life's courage, Min-Fi was ready to charge the stage, armed with a pathetic, crushed bag of dandelions. Suddenly, the giant LED screen blazes to life, flashing a romantic confession for Von Von. But our boy quickly realizes he's not the main character of this particular story. From backstage, trio Mind Hoa, looking all suave in a pristine white suit and clutching a ridiculously giant bouquet of crimson roses, slowly makes his grand entrance. And right on cue, the two other props next to Min-Fi bark at him to stay perfectly still, because apparently, the three of them were supposed to spell out Love Ye as a backdrop for trio Mind Hoa's big moment. The whole cringy confession, from trio Mind Hoa to the girl our boy loved most, plays out right in front of his very eyes. Min-Fi just freezes, rooted to the spot, his heart feeling like it's been turned into a pink cushion for 1,000 tiny daggers. Yeah, life just delivered one heck of a slap to his face, and it stung like 1,000 wasps. But just as Min-Fi hits rock bottom, feeling like the universe's punching bag, the hall doors dramatically swing open. And strutting in like a literal queen, No appears in a stunning radiant red evening gown, making a beeline for our boy, much to the absolute shock of everyone present. It's like she saw this whole pathetic outcome coming from a mile away and had her entire rescue operation pre-planned. With a single casual snap of No's fingers, a cute assistant materializes, instantly giving Min-Fi a complete glow-up and decking him out in a bespoke high-fashion suit that's literally one of a kind. No then confidently hooks her arm through his, flashing a smug, triumphant smile. Our boy's face is beet red, but after life's brutal smackdown, he's totally surrendered, letting No dictate his next moves. And just like that, head held high, he confidently strolls out with her, ditching this whole cruel drama-filled scene. They hop into a gleaming red Ferrari supercar, ready for their grand escape, only for the car to immediately run out of gas. So, they end up dragging themselves to the roadside, chilling there all night, catching the breeze. Min-Fi still reeling, totally baffled why this literal queen is being so unexpectedly kind to him. Still, he secretly thanks her for at least salvaging the last shred of his dignity from that dumpster fire of a night. No just smiles again, casually dropping another invite for him to join her academy. Turns out she'd been pushing him to decide quickly, but when she saw how painfully naive and green he still was, she pulled back, letting him get absolutely crushed to learn a harsh lesson. Because only when all his pathetic hopes were utterly shattered, with nothing left to regret or cling to, could he truly make a definitive, life-changing decision. Min-Fi gazes up at the night sky, letting out a soft sigh. Yup, completely backed into a corner, there's absolutely nothing left for him in this city to cling to. An invisible force, probably the plot, nudges him and he nods. And with that, he officially embraces this wild opportunity, kickstarting an entirely new chapter in his cozy, soon-to-be-op life. Min-Fi, our formerly normal high school student, was about to have his life dramatically rerouted the day he got an invitation to Castle Academy. At the airport, a peculiar old lady suddenly materializes, giving him cryptic instructions. After you leave the hall, go straight to the subway and find the special CC line. It'll take you to Castle Academy. Trusting her entirely, Min-Fi, lugging all his clumsy bags, starts searching for this mythical CC line amidst the chaos of the station. But no train appears, and instead, a security guard eyes him with suspicion, mistaking him for a homeless person and even suggesting he hit up the embassy for food assistance. And while he's still fumbling around, looking completely out of place, some local vagrants gather around, claiming him as a colleague, forcing our boy to aggressively defend his non-homeless status. Just then, some silver-haired dude, claiming to be a fellow student, brazenly saunters up, asking to borrow some spare change for a refreshing can of Coke. But the moment he spots Min-Fi's shiny new Castle Academy ID, his entire demeanor flips, and he starts bowing profusely, realizing he's just tried to scam a fellow peer. To prove his legitimacy, the dude whips out the school's legendary black card, showing it off to Min-Fi, who's now convinced he's just met a super cool senior. Before Min-Fi can even properly greet his senior, the silver-haired dude has already snatched the borrowed money to buy his Coca-Cola. And, true to his original intentions, he promptly bails, leaving our bewildered junior standing alone in the middle of the train station. According to this senior, the CC line is a hidden, non-fixed route, and since their school is buried deep in the mountains, calling it the CC line is totally normal. Apparently, if your level is high enough, the professors will personally welcome you. Otherwise, you're stuck fending for yourself and waiting for the train like a commoner. Min-Fi can't help but wonder. This senior has been grinding for 8 years, and he's still stuck here waiting for the train? Hearing this, the guy immediately launches into a full-blown rant, slamming the entire school board for being a bunch of disrespectful old farts who clearly don't know a thing about respecting their elders. But the second he finishes his tirade, he promptly face plants and starts loudly snoring. Not long after, Minfi, utterly exhausted, also drifts off to sleep. Suddenly, a mysterious bell chime echoes through his mind, pulling him into a bizarre illusion. Within that hazy, dreamlike space, he suddenly snaps awake, looking around only to all our hero saw was this tiny kid, mumbling absolute nonsense like a cryptic NPC. Thinking the kid was lost, Min Fi, being the good guy he is, even fished out some spare change and told him to call his family. Bless his wholesome heart. The kid just looked up, gave a knowing smile, and said, "Wow, after all these years, you're still just as kind, Min Fi." That kid's intense gaze was practically setting our hero on fire. Just then, Finger's absolutely ear-splitting scream about being late ripped through the air. And with that, Min Fi jolted awake. Finger was practically dragging Min Fi, screaming at him to get on the train ASAP. Our hero glanced at the shadowy official, whose face was completely obscured, and honestly thought they were boarding a one-way ticket to the afterlife. Meanwhile, Finger, a complete mess, was frantically hauling his bags and shoving his papers at this super haggard-looking official. The station worker let out a long-suffering sigh and asked, "Han, long time no see. What took you so long to come back?" Finger, completely unfazed, just calmly asked his usual question. "So, did I drop another rank again?" The official's curt reply, "Bro, you're officially F rank now. Hard stop." Yeah, Finger's face was a picture of utter, soul-crushing helplessness. You could practically hear the sad anime music. Just then, Min Fi strolled up and casually presented his brand-new freshman ID. The moment he heard that name, the official froze. Wait, isn't Lu Min Fi the legendary S-rank rookie from all those urban legends? The poor guy was absolutely floored, his mind blown into a million pieces. Because seriously, how was an S-rank student, whose status was literally on par with the headmaster, just chilling here with no grand reception committee? Even Finger, our resident F-rank senior, had his jaw on the floor, mirroring the official's shock. The official clarified that Professor Jen was supposed to pick Min Fi up personally. But, professor things. He was running late. But now, with a casual swipe of that powerful black card, a special VIP train, exclusively for our protagonist, was about to depart. Min Fi, meanwhile, just blinked. He literally had the most VIP S-rank pass in the entire academy, but had been waiting longer and suffering more than a B-rank student. Classic. Thanks to riding the coattails of an S-rank VIP, Finger even got a taste of that sweet, sweet glory. But the moment he set foot in Castle Academy, Min Fi was absolutely flabbergasted by the welcome the school had prepared for him. The only catch? The welcoming committee looked like a bunch of sluggish, pale zombies, making our hero jump out of his skin. The gilded CC-100 train, specifically for S-ranks, also just arrived, to his utter astonishment. The door swung open, and Professor Jen, the one tasked with welcoming new students, immediately full-on tackled Min Fi in a bear hug. Afterwards, both of them changed into their school uniforms and sat at a table with the professor. Before anyone could even mention S-rank, Finger, our B-rank buddy, cheekily raised his hand, trying to order drinks first. The professor, however, just growled and promptly kicked him out, leaving Finger utterly rigid with embarrassment. Then, the professor handed Min Fi a strict non-disclosure agreement, requesting his signature. Apparently, the academy really didn't want their top-secret curriculum leaking out. The professor then began explaining Co-Academy's curriculum to our hero. Turns out their research program was super exclusive. They literally study dragons. In Min Fi's mind, dragons were just legendary creatures that couldn't possibly exist. The professor explained that dragons were mysterious beings revered and feared in every nation. But nobody truly understood what dragons were, and Co-Academy? It's a mysterious organization with one goal: kill dragons. This was essentially a hero factory, churning out dragon slayers. The professor just kept rambling, but our MC was just feeling sorry for the guy, thinking he might have some serious psychological issues. Yeah, this dude needs a therapist more than a teaching credential, he probably thought. The moment he finished that thought, everything went pitch black, like the train had just headbutted a power pole. When the lights flickered back on, that little kid from the corner reappeared, calling Min Fi big brother, and saying they were both on the way to Castle Academy. Then the kid told Min Fi to look outside, because they had just arrived in Dragonland. This was where the Black Dragon King Nihawk, ancestor of the dragon race, was slain on his throne thousands of years ago. His throne was a perpetually snow-capped mountain, and his killer left his body on its peak, now known as Kaiso Kai. He was literally the oldest king in recorded history. The two of them were talking, but little did Min Fi know, it was all just a dream, again. When the professor woke him up, our hero's first thought was, wait, did the train just crash and burn? The professor told him he'd passed out mid-explanation, and then asked, are you that scared of dragons? Min Fi wasn't scared of dragons. What he was scared of was being trapped in this absolutely bonkers, probably cursed academy. Just then, Mr. Masashi arrived with the goods, and upon seeing Min Fi, he was like, wow, another S-rank genius. It's been 40 years since the last one. Apparently, the previous one ended up taking himself out. The professor cut off the tangent, telling Min-Fi, "Now, check out the evidence in this box." Inside was just a scale, but then out of nowhere, the professor asked our guy if he knew how to handle a gun. Oh, you just hit his sweet spot. Before all this, Min-Fi was apparently a literal shooting king in military training. So yeah, he was pretty confident in this area. The professor placed a pistol on the table and told him to shoot the scale. Min-Fi did as he was told, and to his surprise, the bullet just bounced right off the scale and flew back, leaving it totally unfazed. The professor chuckled, explaining that this was a dragon scale found in Old Thon City back in 1900. After it was brought back, the Academy quickly caught on. And the next piece of evidence? A literal golden dragon, sound asleep in a box, just chilling. Our boy Min-Fi, meanwhile, just thought it looked like an incredibly well-made model from a master artisan. Actually, as he leaned in for a closer look, he could almost feel the dragon starting to stir. Just as predicted, the dragon's eyes snapped open, and it started slamming against the glass enclosure. But after trashing the place for a bit, it just went right back to sleep. Talk about commitment to napping. Both the professor and Mr. Masasi were utterly mesmerized by Min-Fi. But when they turned to praise him, our boy was already frozen stiff with fear. As they walked, Min-Fi actually wanted to bail on the whole studying thing, but the professor threatened him, reminding him he'd already signed the form. Refuse, and he'd get brainwashed into a total idiot. Yikes. Left with no choice, Min-Fi figured he might as well just roll with it. So Min-Fi slowly stepped through the grand gates, leading into the majestic Grand Academy. The professor gave him a tour, but after walking for ages, Min-Fi kept wondering why the place was so eerily deserted. Not a soul in sight. Just as the professor also instinctively noticed the weird quiet, an alarm bell suddenly blared across the entire campus. Min-Fi panicked, a wave of dread washing over him. Wait, did those dragons actually come to attack already? He thought. He instantly froze, then wondered when his brain had just casually accepted the existence of dragons as a normal thing. As gunshots erupted all around, and seeing the student council president, Cesare Gattuso, and his gang, the professor suddenly remembered, oh right, today's the school's annual Freedom Day. Before he could even finish the sentence, the poor professor got absolutely riddled with bullets. Before collapsing, he managed to gasp out one last instruction to Min-Fi. Make sure you choose my class. Left in a literal hail of bullets, with no idea what was happening, Min-Fi just crouched in a corner, terrified of getting hit by a stray shot. Covering his head, he just waited for the absurd chaos to end. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed across the entire campus, catching him completely off guard. Seeing things start to quiet down, he bravely decided to run and find a doctor for the professor. That's when Min-Fi accidentally stumbled upon an intense sword fight between the blue and red factions. He just hid in a corner, watching. He had no idea what they were even fighting about, just vaguely thinking, man, everyone at this school seems a little off their rocker. Suddenly, a red-haired girl jumped down right in front of him, aggressively pulling out a gun and pointing it straight at his head. Min-Fi was scared absolutely stiff, practically begging the upperclassman to spare his life. But then, from behind her, another upperclassman appeared, spraying bullets from an assault rifle straight at them. Luckily, Min-Fi managed to dodge just in time, or he would have been totally toast. But when he looked back, that very same bullet had lodged itself straight into the red-haired upperclassman's stomach. Min-Fi watched horrified as she collapsed right in front of him. Suddenly, a throbbing pain shot through Min-Fi's head, and a voice from nowhere asked if he wanted to punish them. Without thinking, he slowly picked up the pistol from the floor and shot the blue-haired kid in the head, right as he was reporting the situation. Min-Fi then stepped out, put a few more rounds into a blonde guy, sending him flying several meters back before taking down the last blue-haired one. Suddenly, strange music started playing, and then a whole banana-green faction came rushing at him, making our guy panic and throw his hands up in surrender. Turns out, they were actually the school's medical team, there to patch up all the students who'd just been brawling. At the same time, the chairman of the disciplinary committee, who also happened to be the head of the school's CL Finance, walked up to Min-Fi to question him. Seeing a freshman daring to involve himself in the battle, the teacher absolutely exploded, giving him a thorough dressing down. Just then, the professor lying nearby also miraculously got revived. He turned to reassure Min-Fi. Seeing the guy who had just been riddled with bullets now bouncing up, laughing, our boy Min-Fi jumped like he saw a ghost, muttering some exorcism chants because, well, he thought he saw a ghost. Professor Klen, ever the picture of chill, calmly explained he wasn't dead yet, so our guy could dial down the panic. That's when the professor finally got to explain. Today was the Academy's official free day, the one day a year students were allowed to unleash total anarchy. Turns out, those weren't real bullets, just tranquilizer rounds packed with super-strength sedatives. On impact, the bullet shatters and evaporates instantly, leaving only a splash of fake blood to mark a kill, without causing any actual injury. And to prove it, the professor even gave him a live demo. After calming his nerves, Min-Fi surveyed the absolute battlefield, with students sprawled everywhere, and couldn't help but be impressed. But seeing the campus grounds look like a literal dump, Professor Klen went full berserk, his bald head practically shining with rage. He then verbally eviscerated the two ringleaders, Suzy Huang and Cesare, threatening to report them to the principal to shut down these useless activities for good. He complained to the principal that this year's free day was pure chaos, causing massive financial damage, and even the school's beloved lawn was completely obliterated. When questioned by the principal, Cesare just puffed out his chest proudly, declaring he wasn't afraid to use his obscenely rich dad's money to pay for the lawn, because his family had nothing but conditions. Hearing this, the principal just chuckled and announced that all maintenance costs would be covered by the school's fund. This mic drop statement left Professor Klen utterly speechless, jaw practically on the floor. The principal even enthusiastically added, "Go ahead and break whatever you want. The school will cover it all." Needless to say, the entire school erupted in cheers, hailing this super understanding, absolute legend of a principal. Our boy Min-Fi, standing nearby, also clapped in celebration, secretly thinking he'd hit the jackpot getting into this school, and even turned to comfort the shell-shocked professor, telling him not to be sad. Suddenly, the principal's voice boomed solemnly over the loudspeaker, welcoming a new student named Lu Min-Fi. He proudly announced that despite just arriving, Min-Fi had already managed to defeat the two resident geniuses, Suzy Huang and Cesare. Truly a genius whose legendary reputation precedes him. The principal even expressed his desire to meet him in person soon. As soon as the call ended, Professor Klen turned to Min-Fi with a look that screamed danger and asked, "Are you not heading back to your dorms, like, right now? Because behind you are literally 1,000 pairs of eyes just itching to eliminate you." Back in his dorm, Min-Fi was completely mesmerized. The place looked like a 5-star hotel suite. Seeing the twin beds, he figured he'd have a roommate. But to his surprise, his roommate was none other than Finger, the guy he met on the train who'd been repeating 8 years of school. Finger excitedly high-fived Min-Fi, congratulating him on his legendary feat of arriving at school and immediately defeating the two great masters, Suzy Huang and Cesare, all on free day. But unlike his excited senior, Min-Fi felt chills crawling up his spine from the 1,000-yard glares, piercing him from all directions. Finger casually dropped the bombshell. It's because Min-Fi just officially became the common enemy of the school's two biggest factions. Duh. After that, he took Min-Fi on a tour of the school, leading him to the first floor of the library, where they could access the Ling speech teaching zone. This was the only place in school where students were allowed to freely use their powers without being bound by any rules. The power of Ling speech came from the resonance between dragon script and dragon blood. There were 7 types of Ling speech: elemental control, spatial expansion, symbiotic thought, self-body forging, psychic intervention, primeval seal, and karmic time. Ling speech could be understood as a special kind of ability, with about 100 different forms discovered, and the ones listed higher were considered stronger. While Finger was engrossed in his lecture, an unexpected accident almost flattened both of them, causing Finger to yell, "Min-Fi, run!" Amidst the chaotic escape, Min-Fi's eyes were accidentally drawn to a small piece of glass, sparkling as it reflected the sunlight. Following that ray of light, he stood stunned before a gigantic, ancient tree. Its form was incredibly bizarre, split in half, one side fresh, the other withered, as if symbolizing both destruction and rebirth. According to Finger, a legend said the Black Dragon King was defeated beneath this very world tree, which is why the Academy created this statue as a symbol of its enduring history. Suddenly, the professor rushed over, calling Min-Fi to his office to retrieve his student ID and reminding him to be on time for his exam tomorrow. First, the professor wanted to test Min-Fi's dragon script bloodline, so he borrowed a box that looked suspiciously like a music box and started it up. They waited for a moment, and the professor eagerly asked if Min-Fi felt the call of his bloodline, but our boy just pondered, then suddenly stirred. The professor thought he was about to unleash a dragon's roar, but nope, it was just a colossal yawn from being sleepy, and he felt absolutely nothing strange. The professor gritted his teeth in frustration and declared that Min-Fi was the first ever exception, mutated because his human genes had completely overwhelmed his dragon genes, making him totally immune to any dragon emperor's influence. But Min-Fi just thought, wait, what if I'm just a normal guy? The professor pondered for a while, still unable to believe that the principal could possibly have misjudged Min-Fi's bloodline. Suddenly, the professor was startled even further and quickly rushed off to report to the principal, leaving our bewildered MC utterly clueless. When he turned to his senior, Finger was already busy typing out a lengthy post, hastily uploading it to social media to let the entire school know that Min-Fi had zero reaction to the Emperor's Ling speech. Because of their epic failure on free day, Shazar's student council had lost the right to use Knot Hall for their meetings. The Lionheart Club remained silent, which meant Suzy Huang had accepted the challenge. Suddenly, Nono gets an urgent online notification about breaking news. Our S-rank freshman shows zero reaction to the Emperor's language. And of course, this hot tea quickly reached Chu Zihuang, the big cheese from the Lionheart Society. Meanwhile, a professor is practically hyperventilating, running to Professor Glen's secret lab to urgently re-examine Lu Mingfei's strange case. They figured an S-rank like Mingfei, but with zero reaction to the Emperor's language unlike Chu Zihuang, made his case the first ever exception. Conversely, the professor wasn't keen on using that legendary bloodline to pressure the younger generation like that. Glenn, ever so cool, reminds the professor they're raising warriors here, not just good little kids. He also subtly encouraged the professor to write an absolutely honest report. Because if he truly possessed the White King's bloodline, he could become an incredibly valuable specimen. But deep down, a teacher like Jin didn't want the student he recruited to eventually become a mere research specimen. Finally, Glenn, with a rare moment of softness, promised the professor he'd keep this quiet until the exams were over. But if Mingfei failed the test, he would report truthfully and try his best to ensure humane treatment. That night, the entire academy conveniently shut down all security systems and wiped all surveillance data clean. A young man then entered the secret bunker and activated the EVA AI personality program. He asked EVA to ensure Lu Mingfei passed this exam, as he still had many lingering questions about him. The next morning, Mingfei sprinted wildly to the exam room just to make roll call. When the proctor started the exam, all the students were bewildered because the test paper was just a blank sheet with no writing. Recalling his senior's advice from yesterday, Finger told him that if he encountered a blank paper, he just needed to copy those illusions onto it. Suddenly, Mingfei's gaze fell upon a remarkably tranquil blonde girl sitting beside him. When the proctor left, only the confused students remained, utterly baffled by what was happening with the sound-emitting projector screen on the board. However, Mingfei had already prepared his cheat sheet from the night before. According to his senior, the biggest flaw in the exam was that the school consistently used only 8 audio versions. And they repeated every 8 years, which explains why his senior studied for 8 years, just to master this trick. Sure enough, just as Finger had predicted, this year's exam was exactly the same as the one from his first year at school. So, he practically had all the answers to the questions right in the palm of his hand. Now all Mingfei had to do was copy down his cheat sheet. He was just about to start copying when he glanced around and saw all the other test takers in a state of utter chaos. Since they had no idea what the questions on the paper were, they were all just doing whatever they felt like. The exam room had devolved into a madhouse, but only the blonde girl remained distinctly different. Having almost finished copying the answers, Mingfei's gaze drifted forward, as if a dark light enveloped him, pulling him into another illusion. There, the familiar young boy with golden eyes reappeared. He called Mingfei over to sit with him, then introduced himself as Lu Mingze. Mingfei was surprised because the kid's full name was identical to that of his own cousin. What's more, the kid even knew about his cringy in-game conversations with his friend, leaving our guy utterly mortified. This kid kept saying things Mingfei couldn't understand, then dragged him from one illusion to the next. The kid even called Mingfei incredibly stupid and then said things that sounded surprisingly romantic. Suddenly, Mingfei saw tears rolling down the kid's cheeks, and then in a flash, the kid pushed him down from a great height. The two leaned back to back in a field of shattered flowers. When he opened his eyes again, he was met with Nono's palpable murderous aura, staring intently at him. Nono then scolded him, demanding how he could possibly sleep like a pig during an exam. When he abruptly jolted awake, he realized the exam time was already over. It was a 3-hour exam, and he had slept through 2 of those hours. Not only that, but for an exam with 8 questions, he somehow submitted 9 answers. Mingfei wanted to review his paper, but Nono snatched it away and submitted it. After that, she flashed a proud smile, as it seemed all of his answers were correct. As anticipated, Mingfei passed and was admitted to Cassell College, prompting Finger to break into a celebratory dance. However, Mingfei's mood wasn't quite right. His senior thought he had been caught cheating, so he kept hounding him, asking if he had ratted him out yet. Only after hearing that he was fine did his senior finally breathe a sigh of relief. He then checked Mingfei's course selection list and saw he'd chosen Professor Luo's magic mechanical design, taught by a notoriously brutal teacher who always took attendance. But lately, Professor Luo had been occupied with a mission to track down dragons. Meanwhile, our main man Diepthong and his trusty sidekick Aki were on a casual mission to investigate traces of dragons deep underwater. But, as plots usually go, a sudden accident snapped the cable connecting their submersible, leaving our duo completely off the grid. Back on the surface, Professor La was beating himself up for not being careful enough to prevent this oopsie. But then, out of nowhere, Diepthong sent a signal to the professor's ship, casually dropping the bomb that they'd found a giant statue at the bottom of the ocean. Turns out, after losing contact, Diepthong and Aki had accidentally stumbled upon a massive bronze palace, chilling silently in the deep abyss. Just as the ancient myths foretold, this was the legendary Palace of Not, the king of bronze and fire. Diep Tong, ever the expert, concluded this wasn't just some dusty old ruin, but the real headache for the team was figuring out how to actually get inside. In the end, they were forced to resort to the super-secret key they'd been keeping under wraps this whole time. The secret door swung open, revealing a woman inside, cradling a child. This kid possessed astonishingly pure dragon blood, a power so immense that even someone like So Tu Huang couldn't even compare. The professor cautiously approached and took the child from the woman's arms. He didn't forget to give her a good scolding, telling her to pay more attention to No, instead of using that distant, cold tone with the child she had raised. After placing the child in a special preservation box, the professor quickly donned his professional diving gear and submerged himself into the cold seawater, beginning his journey into the Dragon King's palace. Once inside, the professor took out the child and presented it before the gatekeeper. As the child's finger touched the gatekeeper, a stream of red blood flowed down the monster's mouth. Immediately after, the door opened, only to reveal Diep Tong and Aki were already casually waiting inside. Once its task was done, the startled child burst into loud cries. The professor had to coax it back into the preservation box so it could continue its nap. The professor swam over to the duo, urgently instructing them to either quickly retrieve the Dragon King's remains or use the latest piece of equipment, an alchemy bomb. With that, the professor made his hasty retreat. Diep Tong and Aki, left to their own devices, resumed their adventurous journey. A new signal then came from the ship, indicating a mysterious building at the bottom of the dam. Diep Tong surfaced to report a dangerously low oxygen concentration in the area. The duo pulled themselves ashore. As they ventured forward, they spotted an abandoned bronze pillar, clearly used for ancient rituals. Diep Tong told Aki to stay put and collect samples with her camera, while he went off to pinpoint the serpent's exact location. He strictly ordered her not to come to his rescue, no matter what, but to save herself first and report back as commanded. Aki, though clearly reluctant, had no choice but to nod in agreement. Once Diep Tong was gone, Aki diligently began her task of photographing every last nook and cranny. On the leaves, she discovered something called Dragon Script, reportedly written by the Dragon King himself. The professor urgently instructed them to back up the data immediately and synchronize it with Noma. As Aki observed, her body suddenly reacted, her heart raced, and she slowly started losing signal with the crew on the ship. The panicked professor immediately ordered them to reel in the cable and report to Diep Tong. "Get to Aki now!" Just as her body was about to give out and she was on the verge of fainting, Diep Tong arrived just in time to catch her. They quickly decided to grab a few things and head back for further research. The very moment Aki touched the ancient statue, a mysterious trap mechanism was suddenly activated, sending her into a panic. A massive dark shadow suddenly lunged forward, embracing her tightly from behind. Panicked beyond belief, Aki screamed at Diep Tong to shoot quickly, only to realize that the dark shadow was actually Diep Tong, protecting her. He had realized that the bizarre statue was secretly following her every move. It seemed Aki, by simply observing the dragon script, had unknowingly become a puppet, manipulated by the statue. Looking down to see their lifeline had also snapped, she became even more frantic. Diep Tong blamed himself, realizing he should never have left her alone. Then, noticing something strange behind him, she asked. Diep Tong replied that his snake had found what looked like an urn of remains. He mused that if the Dragon King was indeed slumbering here, it must still be a child. As they were about to take it, the surroundings suddenly grew ominous. Sensing trouble, he grabbed Aki's hand and bolted out of there. It seemed that because the statue moved, the entire palace had awakened, detected intruders, and was now closing its gates. While they were in deep slumber, the school's alarm bells suddenly blared. Min Fai was abruptly startled awake, looking utterly bewildered. "Why is the bell ringing at this ungodly hour?" he grumbled. He glanced at his senior, who was still loudly snoring, and decided to just lie back down and try to catch more Z's. But then, suddenly, the Kid Min track popped up, declaring ominously, "That's not just a bell, that's the death knell." Then it threw Min Fai into an illusion that almost killed our cozy lead with a severe fear of heights. The cryptic system boy appeared, reminding our MC that the death knell had rung, meaning someone was either dead or dying, and Min Fai was about to get into trouble, but also, it might be an opportunity. He told our MC to unlock a skill to get detailed map info, just like in the games he usually played. Suddenly, an upperclassman's shout woke Min Fai up. Opening his eyes, he saw Finger already in his neat uniform. Both of them then hurriedly ran outside, because the alarm bells were blaring all over the school. Min Fai followed, not understanding a single thing. Finger explained that the current level 1 alert was an emergency call for all senior students to head to the library. On the way, they ran into Nono, and Finger greeted her, only to get instantly roasted because the school was calling for A-rank students, so what was a B-rank like him even doing there? Finger froze in mortified embarrassment, then ran back to his room to cry. What a drama queen. Minfi followed Nono to the library, where A-rank students and above were gathering, and his eyes landed on a blonde girl he didn't expect to also be an A-rank student. At this point, the professors announced the dire situation. 2 members of the enforcement squad were trapped in the dragon ruins, and they needed to find an escape route for them quickly. The screen projected images from inside the labyrinthine palace, and they needed students to decrypt the puzzle to find the path in just 20 minutes. Besides the students, the academy was also seeking help from all over the world. Remembering the Aki channel the teachers mentioned made Min Fi recall the silver-haired girl he had met the other day. Looking around, everyone was swiping their student ID cards, so he did the same, completing his first-time login procedure. The system on his computer screen lit up, greeting him and introducing herself as Eva. Min Fi was utterly astonished when he saw Eva adjusting the familiar configurations, just like in the games he always played. All around him, students were sweating profusely, frantically typing on their keyboards. The professors were also getting impatient, and seeing everyone trying so hard, Minfi casually decided to give it a shot. Who would have thought? He just pressed a random button, and Eva immediately announced that the decryption results were found. Suddenly, all the computer screens in the room went black, and even the electricity of the entire city plunged into darkness. A second later, the main screen displayed the decryption result, and the one who solved it was none other than our boy, Minfi. This caught everyone off guard, while our MC was so shocked he nearly fell backward. And then, everyone's eyes turned towards him. Deep beneath the ocean, Yathang and Aki's situation had escalated to a red alert. The signal from the mothership was completely cut off. Yathang mustered his last ounce of strength, urging the professor to use that tiny key. Understanding the hint, the professor ordered the child to show them the way on the map. Without a word, the child silently pointed towards the hidden exit. Following the direction of the child's hand, Yathang immediately realized the intricate structure of this bronze palace operated like a complex battle formation. The professor anxiously asked about the remaining oxygen. Yathang replied, saying they only had 3 minutes left, a terrifyingly short amount of time. Even with extreme breath-holding, they might barely have a chance to survive. Despite his severely weakened body, Yathang tried to reassure Aki, telling her to prepare to depart. But Aki remained silent, her eyes filled with sorrow. She whispered that they wouldn't make it in time, as the oxygen wasn't even enough for both of them. She wanted to spend her last moments seeing him before this place was completely submerged by water. Aki hesitated, about to confess the feelings she had hidden for so long. "I like you." But before she could finish her words, Yathang leaned in and gave her a passionate kiss amidst the cold water. He looked deep into her eyes, telling her to trust that he would take her out of this cursed place. On the surface, the professor had a bad premonition and immediately ordered the ship to lower its position close to the water surface. According to calculations, the exit point was right beneath the ancient bronze fortress. If they didn't surface within seconds after escaping, the depleted oxygen would kill them instantly. At this moment, the Academy had also completely lost contact with the expedition team for 10 minutes. Suddenly, a friend from his hometown called to check on Minfi. Hearing his old friend's voice eased Minfi's anxiety a little, but he still worried for his 2 friends facing life or death. 14 minutes passed, and the sea surface remained silent, with not a single person in sight. The professor stood on the ship's deck, his hands trembling from self-reproach. Suddenly, she was exhausted, clinging to a copper jar as she handed it to the rescue team. Between sobs, she explained it was what Diep Tong had traded his very life for. The professor tried to dive in and save his student, but everyone held him back. The current was just too strong. Just then, a colossal creature burst from the depths, swallowing Aki whole before vanishing without a trace. The professor screamed in agony, but in that critical moment, he was forced to order the copper jar secured first to complete their mission, burying his grief as he vowed revenge. Gazing at the grotesque creature, Professor Law gritted his teeth, swearing he would personally send it straight to hell. A hail of bullets poured down on the monster, but it showed no fear, instead charging wildly towards the ship, as if intent on devouring everyone on the surface. La declared it wasn't just an ordinary creature, it possessed intelligence. And what it truly cared about was that very copper jar. La immediately ordered 10 torpedo bombs launched, but after they fired, he received no signal. La surmised the monster must have eaten all 10 bombs. Once the signal was re-established, he instantly gave the order to detonate. The bombs exploded, blowing the monster to pieces at the bottom of the sea. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, believing it couldn't have been Dragon King Not. After all, an ancient king wouldn't be naive enough to just gobble up bombs so easily. In the relieved atmosphere, Professor La even joked that Sema would get a perfect score for her internship, praising her excellent work. But no sooner had he finished speaking than the real monster abruptly lunged from behind, dragging Shema into the water as La watched in horror. He screamed in desperation, riddling the water's surface with bullets, but only terrifying silence answered him. Just as they suspected, the one now mocking them and circling the ship was none other than Dragon King Not. He seemed to be toying with prey that had nowhere left to run. Tamfa suddenly caught the signal of a bomb inside the dragon's mouth, but the professor was helpless, as the dragon was now aiming its maw directly at their ship. If they detonated it at this range, the extreme heat blast would incinerate their own vessel. In this do-or-die situation, Tamfo spotted the Kosan Dam up ahead. La ordered the ship to accelerate at full speed towards it. Seeing the dragon show signs of hesitation, La subtly messed with the copper jar, forcing Not to furiously pursue them to reclaim his treasure. As they neared the dam gate, the single key instantly opened a path for the ship to charge inside. The very instant the dragon's mouth was about to swallow the ship whole, La gave the order to detonate the final bomb. The terrifying force sent one of Not's sharp fangs flying, piercing straight through Professor La. In excruciating pain, he still managed to use spirit words combined with the key to slam the dam gates shut, trapping the Dragon King inside. The blood debt had finally been paid. Back at the academy, where the atmosphere was tense enough to snap, Principal Andu's image appeared on the large screen. He announced the good news. The ship had safely docked along with invaluable documents. The entire academy erupted in joyous celebration. The principal once again publicly commended Lo Min-Fi, the one who had made the greatest contribution to this mission. The discriminatory glances from before had vanished, replaced by thunderous applause for the S-rank genius. On his way back to his room, Sotru Huang unexpectedly followed him and proactively thanked Min-Fi. He didn't hesitate to invite him to join the Lionheart Society, even considering him the most promising potential successor. Min-Fi froze mid-stride upon hearing this, fearfully stepping back to immediately refuse. Sotru Huang calmly respected his opinion, though he knew for certain that Cesare would also soon come to invite Min-Fi. Suddenly, the solemn sound of a street wind chime echoed, and flocks of white doves took flight into the high sky. Sotru Huang quietly said, "This chime signals someone has passed on. May they find peace in the next life." At this moment, the principal was beside Professor La, who was gasping for breath, a dragon's fang impaled in his chest. La whispered his final words. He said that the copper jar was retrieved by Diep Tong and Aki from that fortress, and he begged the principal not to tell the students about the entire force being wiped out in Kosong Kav, but rather to just say they left on a mission. Because he believed that for those children, dragon slaying should now only feel like an exciting and passionate endeavor, one worth striving for their entire lives. Before his breath finally faded, La struggled to add, "Please check on Nono for me. She'll need a different mentor now." Meanwhile, in his room, Lo Min-Fi unexpectedly received a very formal invitation email. Finger only needed to glance at the title to know that Chisara's student council had already begun trying to rope him in. At Seo Academy, who didn't know the name Cesare Gattoso, a man from an illustrious Western noble bloodline, whose family business empire spanned the entire globe. From a young age, he was the default sole heir of the Gattoso family, carrying the expectation of becoming a true emperor in the future. Hearing about this dude's super-stacked family background, Min-Fi started racking his brain, wondering if he'd accidentally offended him on his first day. But all our man could recall was his completely unbothered thought, "Man, the food here must be absolutely bomb." Min-Fi firmly told Finger he wasn't joining the student council, but the senior bro enthusiastically dragged him along, promising there'd be an all-you-can-eat gourmet buffet. Despite his best efforts to refuse, Min-Fi was ultimately escorted to the ball by Finger. Gazing at the grand and lavish scene that was utterly overwhelming, Min-Fi couldn't help but be stunned. Finger casually chimed in, "See, told ya. That Cesare dude is literally flexing his cash right in your face." No sooner had he spoken than both of them were even more stunned to see a magnificent red carpet, strewn with vibrant roses, already laid out. While Min-Fi was still bewildered, thinking he was the main character of this grand entrance, Nono suddenly appeared. She wore a stunning, glamorous red dress, like a fiery rose, slowly striding down the flower-covered path towards a waiting Cesare. It was then that both brothers literally face-palmed. Turns out this whole rose carpet spectacle was for his soulmate, and there wasn't a single spot reserved for a young man like Min-Fi. As the ball's opening music echoed, President Cesare, hand in hand with Nono, descended from the stage amidst thousands of admiring gazes. He greeted everyone, then gently turned to wish Nono a happy birthday. This unexpected romantic gesture surprised Nono a little, as she had never told anyone her birthday. But she quickly regained her usual calm and haughty demeanor. The dance began in the magnificent hall. Seeing everyone sway to the rhythm, Finger suddenly got all jittery, realizing it had been way too long since he last hit the dance floor. Without waiting for Min-Fi to react, he immediately grabbed our man by the waist and dragged him to the center of the dance floor. Finger tried to play the suave gentleman, but just as the atmosphere was getting poetic, he awkwardly stomped all over Min-Fi's foot. Not stopping there, Finger then spun Min-Fi 360 degrees until our dude was so dizzy, snot and drool were threatening to spill, looking less like a dancer and more like a teddy bear being tossed around. From above, President Cesare and Nono looked down with expressions of slight concern. He was worried Finger would scare Min-Fi so badly he'd ditch them and run straight to the Lionheart Club. But everything was all part of Cesare's grand calculation. He clapped his hands, signaling the music to stop, then descended with a speech full of psychological manipulation. With the regal demeanor of a true sovereign, Cesare used such flowery words that the crowd seemed enchanted, continuously hailing him as the most outstanding. Even so, he feigned humility, using sincere eyes to invite everyone to join the lunatics like himself. The crowd enthusiastically applauded in agreement. Suddenly, Cesare dramatically called out Min-Fi's name and invited him onto the stage. The sudden turn of events left our man completely bewildered, not understanding what was happening. Seeing Min-Fi frozen in place, Cesare gave a generous laugh, saying he'd give him more time to think, then invited him to join the fun. While Min-Fi was still awkwardly standing in the middle of the floor, Zero, the mysterious girl who had been playing music, abruptly stopped and walked straight up to him. She boldly invited him to a partner dance. Before Min-Fi could even close his mouth, Finger gave him a powerful shove towards the girl. Zero already had her dance attire prepared underneath her cloak. She placed her hand on Min-Fi's shoulder and casually ordered the orchestra to play a tune of her choice. The two of them danced, to the astonishment of the entire school. Min-Fi seemed utterly captivated by the sharp beauty of this blonde bombshell. As the dance ended, Jero simply bowed silently, then coldly walked away, leaving a tiny bit of emptiness in Min-Fi's eyes. Suddenly remembering it was Nono's birthday, Min-Fi quickly ran to the parking lot to congratulate her. He wondered why the host of the party would leave so early. I mean, according to every romance novel script, when a perfect guy throws such a huge party, the girl should be totally swooning, right? But Nono just coldly replied that she didn't need him to do that, as her birthday was a private matter. She then asked Min-Fi if he knew how to drive, because she wanted to go for a drive up the mountain for some fresh air. Just then, the Academy's AI system Norma broadcast an emergency signal, suspecting a Dragonkin invasion. All entrances and exits were immediately sealed off. Satellite weaponry was activated to protect the students. The invaders were a squad of 13, suspected Dragonkin minions who had tracked a mysterious bronze jar back here. Since all the elite specialists were currently on business trips, Norma began formulating a plan for battle apps. While the Academy was plunging into chaos, our cozy lead was living his best life, chilling on a mountaintop date with his senior. Seeing all the beware of bear signs, Min-Fi panicked and warned Nono, but she just calmly closed her eyes and said, "Bears in the mountains? Totally normal." But when Min-Fi turned back, Nono was gone, replaced by the pesky kid Lu Mingzhe. He just popped up to warn Min-Fi about a dangerous curve ahead, waiting for him and the person he liked. Min-Fi absolutely exploded, scolding him to bring his senior back immediately and get lost. The kid, Mingzhe, then unexpectedly whispered a mind-blowing secret to Min-Fi. Even though she's being hotly pursued by the killing professor, Nono's heart hasn't actually been swayed by anyone yet. Even when her two closest friends, Ye Sheng and Aki, passed away, she didn't shed a single tear or show any sorrow. He even offered to help Min-Fi confess to his senior, which made our boy blush beet red and scold the kid fiercely. Just as he was in the middle of his rant, Nono suddenly reappeared. She squinted and asked who he was just calling a devil. Min-Fi jumped, awkwardly fumbling for words to change the subject. But his string of bad luck wasn't over yet. Just as they were about to continue, their car engine suddenly sputtered and died in the middle of the winding mountain road. Meanwhile, back at Sa Academy, someone was frantically messaging Nono, warning her to be careful because the situation was spiraling into utter chaos. The students had already managed to bag 7 of the 13 intruders. The strange part was that 4 of them were foreigners, and the recruiters seemed to be intentionally creating a motley crew to throw everyone off. According to Noma Systems' investigation, no one had yet caught a glimpse of the leader's true face. To track down the remaining intruders, the only way was to use word spirit, but the school's regulations were a solid wall, preventing any superpowers from being used haphazardly. Teacher Selin anxiously asked Professor Mann if they could use the Void Serpent word spirit to locate the intruders, because under the tight grip of the regulations, all their powers were currently in a deep slumber. Professor Mann suddenly got an idea. Tell Selin to call his father, who happened to be the night watchman, and ask him to lift this blockade. But the principal was one step ahead. He had already directly contacted the night watchman to request the removal of the regulations. In this desperate situation, with ancient dragons about to awaken, the principal also wanted to seize the opportunity for the students to experience their true power. At the same time, Selin also called and made the request to his father, and surprisingly enough, he agreed instantly. Standing before the oil lamp that had burned steadily for over 10 years, the night watchman quietly blew out its flame. That act wasn't just him breaking a habit. It was officially the very first time he'd ever lifted the regulations, unleashing all the suppressed power of Castle Academy. Min Fai and his senior strolled along the mountain road, eventually stopping in front of a tranquil pond. She invited him to sit down and soak their feet together, just relaxing. They sat there, distant yet intimately close, chatting and laughing happily. He suddenly brought up the sacrifice of Ye Sheng and Aki, Nono's close friends, to which Nono replied that the academy had only just announced the passing of Professor Man, who was also her mentor. As for the whereabouts of her two friends, they still hadn't been found, so nothing was certain yet. She spoke with a hint of sadness in her voice. He didn't want his students to be afraid of his sacrifice, so he only said he had completed his mission and then departed. Professor Man had also once said that if he truly passed away, the school wouldn't announce the news. Although those were words he wanted everyone to know, for her, it felt like Professor Man himself was telling her he was already dead. When Minfi asked if she was heartbroken, Nono coldly replied that if she ever died, she'd simply post a discreet notice on the bulletin board saying she'd settled down at the new island base. By then, whoever wanted to understand could, otherwise, they could just slowly forget her. Hearing him ask, "Don't people in the academy fear death?" Nono just thought it was normal. Some, after graduating, completely withdraw and pretend they never even knew dragons existed in this world. As for those who stay, they certainly have their own reasons for it. Minfi wanted to delve deeper into his senior's reasons, but she calmly replied, "Oh, I just wanted to run away from home." The two looked up at the pitch-black, starless sky and continued to chat. Back at Nome Academy, the students were giving their all to repel the mysterious intruders. After the candle suppressing their word spirits was extinguished, they unleashed the Void Serpent to track down the remaining hidden intruders. But their main concern was that the academy was critically short on guards. Those glowing specks symbolized areas already guarded by students, but there were still plenty of spots left completely unattended. Meanwhile, Intruder 13 was slowly making his way towards the academy's wine cellar. After successfully infiltrating the wine cellar, he spotted a mysterious door, pulling out the black card his master gave him to swipe it. The door swung wide open, not a single guard or defense in sight. Talk about an easy entry. Over in Chisar's hall, he was absolutely ecstatic, finally getting to use the spirit tongue he'd craved for so long. After pinpointing the intruder's location, he immediately shot a call to his rival, Sotur Huang, to casually brag about who'd finished their mission first. Meanwhile, Sotur Huang was getting seriously anxious, seeing as his team hadn't made a single move yet. Suddenly, Noma alerted the Lions Club, telling them to immediately evacuate the library area. Totian felt it was totally unfair. Didn't they literally just say they were short-staffed, which is why they dragged students like them in, only to now tell them to get lost? Sotu Huang immediately ordered Totian to follow instructions, so she reluctantly complied, calling him away from the scene. But the order explicitly stated Sotu Huang had to stay. With the law barrier shattered, they feared his unique bloodline spirit tongue might cause some serious friendly fire. So naturally, he told Totian to peace out first. She sighed, warned him to stay safe, then flashed a reassuring smile and left. The intruders were gradually advancing into the hall, where all the academy students were conveniently frozen in time. One of their captains involuntarily looked up at Aki's portrait and let out a sigh. Then, looking up again, he got the unsettling feeling that the person in the center of Chisar's hall was wide-eyed, staring at them and smiling. Receiving a command from Chisar's rising music, the students immediately snapped back to normal, weapons appearing in their hands. Just as they were about to throw down, the enemy captain on the other side received a surprised call from a TV station demanding an interview. "Bro, read the room!" Furious, she chewed them out, then dramatically slammed off her helmet. Then Mai and Chisar turned to introduce themselves first. Her name sounded vaguely familiar. Turns out Mai was Aki's older sister. They hadn't grown up together, so she didn't really count them as sisters. She just felt sorry for her unlucky younger sibling, foolish enough to accidentally become someone else's pawn. Mai then leisurely turned on some music, tossing something down. When it finished, that's when the real battle would begin. Chisar wanted to know why they were even here. She calmly replied, "Oh, obviously, it's for that bronze jar you guys brought back." Even though she was chatting casually, in her mind, Chisar was secretly counting down the seconds until the song ended to make her move. Mai, however, showed zero fear. She even recognized that his spirit tongue was the very thing that had shut down the entire system here. But she wasn't too worried because besides the elites busy abroad, among all the students in this academy, only he and Sertur Huang truly possessed top-tier power. Her mission was simply to hold back Chisar, leaving the rest for someone else to handle. But what she didn't know was that their entire little chat had been overheard by Sertur Huang on his side. After Noma's 5-night chimes, they began their one-on-one battle. At the same time, the other mysterious guest had also arrived, seeking out Sertur Huang. Her nickname? The Three Nothings Girl. Before coming here, Mai had warned her about Sotura Huang, saying, "Be careful with him, he's the beast they're raising." It was only then that Sotura Huang truly realized just how ruthless the rumors painted him to be. The professors were baffled that this girl was acting alone and hadn't even bothered bringing any weapons. But Manthua knew it was, because her spirit tongue was so ridiculously powerful, she didn't need any. Hearing them urging to quickly finish the battle, Sotura Huang began chanting his spirit tongue incantation. Who knew his spirit tongue was Quan Diem, ranked 89th, incredibly dangerous and rare. Its explosive power was on par with a napalm bomb. Now that's why they were feeling so lucky Sotura Huang was on their side. But what they truly couldn't imagine was that the 3-0 girl actually possessed the exact same Quan Diem spirit tongue as Sotu Huang, making the professors ridiculously curious about their origins. Meanwhile, Intruder 13 was leisurely advancing deeper into the academy when Eva spotted him, threatening him to get out immediately. Yet, not only did he not leave, he casually asked Eva for directions to the scat area. "Bro, do you even know what's happening?" And believe it or not, Eva actually friendly gave the young man super detailed directions. But while he was confused, wondering if she was telling the truth, he considered trying it out. Then he turned, saw her sinister smile, started to panic, felt a chill down his spine, and decided running away was, indeed, the best plan. Although a bit spooked, he closed his eyes and went for it anyway, because the reward for completing the mission had just surged to 5 massive potato stacks. He thought to himself, after this I can totally retire early and live out my days in peace. Suddenly, his phone buzzed, promising another directive. Before he could even finish listening, he accidentally walked into a flooded area, not paying attention, and fell straight into a deep current, completely missing the final directive. Taking matters into his own hands, he swam down looking for an exit, only to stumble upon an ancient gate. When he tried to touch it, our guy felt an inexplicable, uncomfortable pull. He wondered if something terrifying was waiting on the other side. But then, in a classic clumsy MC move, he accidentally slipped and flung the door wide open. Meanwhile, back with our budding lovebirds, while the academy was in utter chaos, they were chilling, gazing at each other and chatting away. Suddenly, Nano explained everything. Shazare was annoyed because he knew the other harem contender, Sotu Huang, had also invited our MC to join his squad. After all that back and forth, Dan Tri still insisted he join their student council. Right in the middle of this cozy atmosphere, Dan Tri suddenly pulled out the beauty trap card, sweetly inviting him to join the student council. Minfi started getting flustered, secretly thinking, "Oh, so Shazare totally sent this older sis to seduce me, huh?" He told himself to stand firm and resist this temptress, but deep down, he was kind of looking forward to the seduction. Typical MC problems. As if reading Minfi's mind, Nono flat out declared this was her personal invitation and had nothing to do with that guy. She just wanted a junior under her wing, simple as that. Sensing something fishy, Minfi quickly backed away. Wasn't being her junior just another way of being Shazare's errand boy? Or worse, her errand boy? Nono immediately explained that those two things were completely different. He is him and she is her. End of story. Even though they were engaged, it was just a dry political arrangement. Nothing more. Hearing the word engagement, Minfi took another step back, feeling the sudden pressure. Nono boldly declared that if they could back him up, she could absolutely protect him too, guaranteeing no one in this entire school would dare touch a single hair on his head. Minfi, ever the comedian, retorted, "Oh yeah, then why didn't my senior step in and save me during that dance earlier?" Nono quickly made an excuse, saying she was about to rush in, but Shazare held her back. Hearing that, Minfi calmed down, secretly thinking, so Dan Tri actually had good intentions for me after all. Nono promised that if he ever ran into trouble, she would definitely lend a hand. This declaration hit his pride just right, making Minfi's manliness flare up. He boldly announced that if the chance ever arose, he would wholeheartedly help her back. "Well, since fate brought us together, why don't you repay that debt today?" Nano whispered softly, her eyes completely captivated by Minfi. She gently confided that she hadn't received a single birthday gift today. Minfi started panicking. On this desolate mountain peak, where in the world was he supposed to dig up a gift right now? He secretly figured her gifts back at the dorm must already be piled sky high. But for Nono, all those gifts were just a drop in the ocean. The only gift she truly yearned for was her mother's presence. Every year, she waited for a sign from her, just to feel like she wasn't so alone in this world anymore. Nono walked forward, gazing up at the distant night sky. "I wonder what I'll get this year. If only I had a bouquet of flowers right now, that would be perfect." Seeing Nono's lonely figure, Minfi subconsciously called out to little Min Track in his mind for help. Suddenly, car headlights lit up the entire area, and from the horizon, a breathtaking display of sparkling fireworks exploded. Nono was stunned, then cheered with happiness like a child. Minfi also hadn't expected the bouquet of flowers that Kid mentioned to be such a magnificent fireworks display. Nono gazed at the brilliant lights and sighed. "No matter who these fireworks are for, I'm going to consider them a gift for myself." And with that, she loudly wished herself a happy birthday in pure joy, as happy tears unexpectedly rolled down her cheeks. Turns out, behind that elegant exterior, the person this senior was waiting for every night was her own mother. Moved by that moment, Min-Fi finally nodded in agreement. Starting today, I officially pledge to be your junior. His sudden affirmation left Nono utterly stunned. Intruder 13 accidentally stumbled upon a secret door, but before he could even celebrate, he was shoved headfirst into a massive holding tank. Gazing at the vast expanse of water, he even mumbled, "Does this school keep sharks or something?" No sooner had he finished speaking than a giant shark loomed into view, baring its razor-sharp teeth as it stared him down. Luckily, thanks to his otherworldly charisma that had made all creatures wary since childhood, the shark merely observed him before vanishing, saving him by the skin of his teeth. He instinctively kept running and discovered a state-of-the-art research institute hidden deep beneath the spirit shrine. With a powerful black card in hand, he whistled as he strolled in, acting like he owned the place. Venturing deeper, he witnessed the principal in a tense discussion with the research team, all gathered around a mysterious bronze jar. Seeing the treasure exactly as described by his mysterious employer, he was practically drooling, already counting the 5 million coins about to hit his bank account. Down below, the self-proclaimed experts were practically foaming at the mouth, demanding an immediate dissection of the jar to unlock its secrets. However, the headmaster firmly put his foot down. He explained that the shell was crafted from an incredibly rare regenerative metal, something even a Dragon King would struggle to open from the outside. Everyone immediately fixated on a strange, unnatural hole on the jar's surface. The headmaster suspected it was a trace of the gray tin solution, the only known substance capable of corroding this formidable shell. But when the Noma system scanned through the egg's shell, everyone was utterly stunned. It had a 2-layered structure, and that hole wasn't from corrosion. It was an old wound, or rather the remnants of a hatched cocoon. Something terrifying had already escaped from within. The headmaster immediately ordered an evacuation and lowered the egg's temperature, hoping to prevent another catastrophic incident. Waiting for the perfect moment, Agent 13 stealthily crept towards his target. Standing before the egg, a bizarre hallucination sent shivers down his spine, but his insatiable craving for 5 million coins quickly overpowered any fear of death. Before making his move, he even snapped a few souvenir photos for his retirement album, just so he'd have something cool to brag about later. But as he gazed intently into the crack on the egg, a bone-chilling aura made him break out in a cold sweat. He instantly recoiled, muttering exorcism chants under his breath. Utterly terrified, he decided that his life was definitely worth more than 5 million coins and beat a hasty retreat. In his frantic panic, he completely forgot the bottle of gray tin solution his employer had explicitly instructed him to pour onto the egg. From the encroaching darkness, the headmaster quietly observed the entire chaotic event unfold. The moment Agent 13 vanished, the headmaster silently picked up the forgotten bottle and poured its contents directly into the egg's ominous crack. This mysterious action was the very spark that ignited the awakening of the legendary Dragon King. Meanwhile, in another part of the academy, Cesare and Mai were engaged in a lively game of cat and mouse. Perfectly matched in skill and power, their clash was quickly escalating into a dramatic showdown. Just as their fierce duel reached a stalemate, an incredibly potent surge of killing intent suddenly slammed into both of them, sending them flying. The entire area plunged into darkness as the power instantly died. Mai had no choice but to light a candle, desperately trying to navigate through the sudden gloom. Following bizarre footprints to a scorched wall, they immediately started blaming each other, though both vehemently denied any involvement. Suddenly, the unsettling ding of an elevator echoed through the unnerving silence. The truly terrifying part was that even as the elevator ascended, Cesare couldn't detect a single heartbeat within. Cadmus Academy was teetering on the brink of utter annihilation. Meanwhile, our accidentally overpowered country boy, Min-Fi, and his senior, Nono, were leisurely heading back, completely oblivious to the nightmare awaiting them. As Min-Fi and Nono casually made their way back, Nono finally checked her phone, only to see an emergency message from Cesare. The academy was under attack. Sitting beside her, Min-Fi overheard and instantly panicked, but Nono's expression remained completely unbothered, as if she just read a spam email. She calmly replied that Cadmus Academy had weathered thousands of years of battles against Dragonkind, especially with two of their strongest, Cesare and So-Tu Hoang, currently defending it. By the time they even managed to get the car back to the academy, the whole battle might already be over anyway. However, contrary to Nono's optimistic predictions, So-Tu Hoang was far from peaceful. He was currently locked in a desperate struggle against a beast that was uncannily similar to himself. The observing professors quickly realized that the mysterious stoic girl fighting So-Tu Hoang still hadn't unleashed her full power. They even suspected her divine words could utterly overwhelm So-Tu Hoang, and her true goal was merely to buy time and tie him down. At the same time, a different professor spotted an intruder trying to make a break for it from the school gate. He immediately ordered the students to swarm him. Amidst a hail of projectiles, this guy still managed to flex his handsomeness with some ridiculously skilled motorcycle maneuvers. Just as this wannabe villain thought he was making his smooth escape to a peaceful retirement, Nono and Minfi's Ferrari suddenly slammed right into him with a resounding crash. After causing a major traffic incident, Nono didn't even flinch, calmly asking, "Did we just hit someone?" Meanwhile, our accidentally overpowered MC, sitting right beside her, had already gone completely ghostly pale. Minfi frantically scrambled out of the car to check on the victim, but before he could even utter a word, the guy had already pressed a dagger to his throat. Suddenly, in that split second of looking closely at each other's faces, both of them seemed to freeze. Turns out, they were none other than a pair of online besties who had faced life and death together in virtual worlds. The dagger was instantly forgotten as they joyfully shook hands, grinning from ear to ear. Old Man Dung was stunned, realizing this weird place was actually the Cadmus Academy Minfi had told him about, and coincidentally, the exact spot where he'd just finished his job and was trying to make a quick getaway. Glancing at the swarm of students now rushing towards Old Man Dung with palpable killing intent, the two brothers exchanged a knowing look. Just like that, Old Man Dung swiftly hopped into Nono's car. The whole crew immediately conspired to create a fake hostage situation, turning Minfi and Nono into captives so Old Man Dung could make his escape. The only problem was their acting was so comically bad, they looked nothing like real hostages, forcing Minfi to scream for help. Suddenly, a terrifying explosion ripped through the air behind them, blasting a wave of scorching heat directly onto their necks. Peering into the rear view, they saw a teenager whose body was glowing as brightly as a literal flame, casually strolling right towards them. The two dudes instantly jumped, scared witless, and slammed the gas pedal, speeding off like their lives depended on it. The fiery figure just kept watching, calling out Big Brother over and over, but nobody dared to answer. Feeling the terrifying thermal energy spreading around, the professor shivered, pretty sure this was a pure-blooded dragon. Thousands of bullets rained down on it, but they literally didn't do a thing. Wherever he stepped, the ground erupted in flames, rendering all weapons and explosives utterly useless. Out of nowhere, he started chanting fire spirit magic, instantly blowing away and incinerating half the academy. Meanwhile, Sir Huang, who was in a death match with some girl, had to call a temporary truce to answer his phone. After getting the situation report from the academy, he immediately told everyone to find cover, realizing that the enemy's fire control was way beyond his own. Sir Huang turned to the girl and asked, "No, is this whole chaotic mess caused by your side?" She simply uttered, with perfect nonchalance, "Technical malfunction," and surprisingly, Sir Huang actually bought it hook, line, and sinker. Witnessing the academy burning down in the absolute worst-case scenario, Mai immediately called her leisurely bathing boss at home to chew her out, because she was about to be buried with the entire school. Hearing Mai report that the copper jar had cracked and the creature inside was burning down the entire academy, the boss was utterly floored. Shazari suddenly rushed over and snatched the phone, describing the guy as looking exactly like a walking, mobile steel furnace. Before Shazari could finish, Mai snatched the phone back, continued her furious rant, then swung it to record a video and sent it directly to her boss. Being intimately knowledgeable about dragon species, with just a glance, she recognized that the one causing the havoc wasn't not, but actually Constantin. Even worse, it was completely out of control, its unstable powers making it unable to command its own strength. Constantin's body would quickly overload and collapse. The consequence of that collapse would be a world-shattering explosion, named Truck Long, powerful enough to flatten this entire mountain. Seeing her boss frantically trying to find a solution, Mai added another swear word for good measure, then decisively hung up. Back with Minfi's group, Nono and Old Dung had found a hidden corner to huddle in. It was then that Old Dungan finally confessed he was hired by a mysterious online dude to infiltrate the academy and steal something special from a photo. Hearing this, Nono shrewdly deduced that the mastermind was definitely someone who specialized in hunting down mysterious supernatural events. In the midst of all the tension, Minfi scrutinized the photo of Old Dungan's egg and discovered a crack. He immediately turned to scold Old Dungan. "You probably cracked the shell, didn't you? That's why this monstrous thing crawled out, right?" Old Dungang hurriedly clarified, "That crack was already there before I even snuck in. It looked too weird and ominous. That's why I abandoned the goods and ran for my life." As Nono knew, a dragon's sense of smell is incredibly sharp, but there was something strange about this particular dragon. It was already very close, yet it didn't immediately detect them. She had a strong hunch that it was trying to search for them, or more precisely, looking for one specific person among them. Just as Minfi had the idea to rush out and create a diversion, fingers suddenly materialized out of nowhere. The fright made the young man scream out loud, and naturally, that yell immediately caught the dragon's attention. Realizing he'd messed up, Finger immediately started playing dumb, whining, crying, and throwing a tantrum. Didn't you drag me to that dance party in the first place? I haven't even had a full meal yet, and now we're facing a literal dragon king. Suddenly, a dazzling light shone directly into the hidden corner where they were tucked away. The dragon was slowly approaching, its mouth incessantly muttering, calling out Big Brother. Seeing the monster's entire body blazing with fire, the whole group decided to risk it, bolting headlong towards the swimming pool. Just as they reached the spot, they coincidentally bumped into Mai and Cesare. Seeing the reunited couple, Cesare and Nono, Min-Fi, the young man who had just started dating an older girl, suddenly froze. Finger immediately pulled him along, lightly scolding, "Run, dude, run! Her boyfriend's here, it's not your turn to care about her." Suddenly, Cesare spoke up, telling Nono to take Min-Fi and protect him. She wondered how he could be so sure the dragon would chase Min-Fi, but Cesare didn't answer. His eyes were sharp and cold, as if he'd already decided to stay and fight this monster to the bitter end. After Nono ran off, Cesare looked at Mai, who was still standing there, and showed a puzzled expression. Mai calmly replied that she had no interest in fighting to the death with him. She was simply fulfilling her responsibility as a captain to protect the others. Right at this moment, Potato called again. Mai was about to utter her final goodbyes to her friend, but the other end of the line instead dropped a piece of life-or-death information. To deal with that dragon, they had to use non-metallic fritz bullets. While these bullets couldn't actually kill it, they had the ability to repel the flames. Without a moment's hesitation, the two took their ambush positions. The instant that dragon poked its head out, dozens of fresh bullets rained down directly on its face. Nobody expected this totally bonkers strategy to actually work. The sheer bullet pressure made the dragon recoil, flinching backward. While everyone outside was battling for their lives, shedding blood to take down the enemy, inside the pool area, Min-Fi, Finger, and Old Duong were just chilling, swimming like there wasn't a single world-ending threat happening. After a good long soak, the trio finally got around to properly introducing themselves. Min-Fi's jaw dropped. He never expected his online buddy to have such an epic, cool job. Old Duong just humbly scratched his head, mumbling that he was just naturally agile and born with antibodies against weird stuff. But alas, that sweet $5 million gig had completely slipped through his fingers. Hearing about a job worth $5 million, both Min-Fi and Finger's eyes practically popped out of their heads. As they were just casually chatting, all three suddenly felt a chilling sensation run down their spines, goosebumps prickling their skin, imagining that fiery dragon waltzing right in. Quick-thinking Finger immediately came up with an escape plan, and all three held their breath, sinking deep to the bottom of the pool. But strangely, the moment he submerged, only Min-Fi once again found himself falling into an illusion. Gazing at the majestic mountains around him, he was 100% sure this was another one of that kid Lu Min-Trak's shenanigans. With plenty of experience under his belt, Min-Fi proactively went looking for the kid. Suddenly, a small boy appeared ahead, bearing a strange birthmark on his face, looking both oddly familiar and completely new. Hearing Min-Fi call his name, the boy slowly turned, his lips still ceaselessly calling out, "Big Brother." The kid approached Min-Fi, sniffing around him, leaving our hero utterly bewildered. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the scene, the architecture before him crumbling as a volcano erupted. This whole apocalyptic vibe strangely gave him a sense of nostalgia. Taking a closer look at the kid, a chill ran down Min-Fi's spine as he realized this was the human form of the dragon currently tearing the academy apart. The more he backed away, the closer it advanced. Out of nowhere, the kid Lu Min-Trak suddenly appeared, launching a fierce kick that sent the dragon flying into the distant horizon. Snapping back to reality, he couldn't find Finger or Old Duong anywhere, but next to him, clear dragon footprints were etched into the bottom of the pool. Just then, the principal appeared out of nowhere, inviting him to follow. Right now, all the Academy's combat personnel were gathered below, and that legendary dragon was completely surrounded. From the observation deck, the principal handed Min-Fi a special bullet, one of the few ultimate weapons capable of truly finishing off the Dragon King. Holding the bullet, Min-Fi bashfully broke out in a cold sweat, claiming his abilities were far too limited. "Why would you trust me with this kind of plot-critical, world-saving burden?" he wondered. The principal simply responded that it would be as easy as how he'd casually taken down Cesare and So Tu Hoang. His mission was to observe the Dragon King until he saw one of its eyes move, then immediately fire this bullet. Seeing Min-Fi still wondering why he was the chosen one, the principal calmly replied, "Because you are the chosen one. Besides," he added, "you possess a body completely immune to spirit time, a phenomenon that affects everyone else in my field." The principal patted Min-Fi's shoulder in encouragement, then simply walked away. Meanwhile, over on this side, our two good friends were really showing their true colors. The moment he heard the Dragon King's footsteps, Finger took off running, completely abandoning Min-Fi, his so-called comrade. While cowering and hiding, they were horrified to hear the dragon's thunderous roar calling out, Big brother! After losing the last shred of his sanity, Constantine completely lost control, tearing off his human disguise and transforming into a true colossal dragon. This surreal and terrifying transformation left every single student present absolutely gobsmacked. Amidst the apocalyptic chaos, only Principal Andu remained bizarrely unbothered. He slowly took steady steps forward, his deep, warm voice effortlessly calming the panicking students. His aged eyes narrowed sharply, and then he suddenly shot off with blinding speed, clearly beginning to chant a powerful spirit incantation. Tracking the principal's every move, Min-Fi felt time itself truly slowing down. Extremely tense, he carefully locked his aim onto the target. Suddenly, Lu Min-Trak appeared out of nowhere, wrapping his arms around Min-Fi's waist and whispering encouragement. Regaining his focus, Min-Fi instantly pulled the trigger, and the bullet struck its exact mark. Once the principal confirmed the Dragon King had lost its metal manipulation abilities, he immediately ordered all students to switch ammo and unleash continuous firepower. Finger, absolutely terrified, frantically bolted before he got his guts shot out. At this point, only Old Duong remained, standing rooted to the spot, staring intently at the dragon. But to everyone's shock, the dragon suddenly plunged down towards him, using its massive wings to shield him from the relentless storm of bullets. The Dragon King stared intently at him until its body slowly dissolved, leaving behind only a dry skeleton. It kept calling him Big Brother and weakly urged him to run away quickly. Old Duong fearfully recoiled, then bolted without looking back. But even as the dragon drew its last breath, its eyes were fixed on our boy, as if trying to impart some final dramatic wisdom. Old Man Dung, meanwhile, was frantically tearing through the spooky, gloomy forest. That tragic scene had accidentally triggered a flood of memories between our MC and his younger brother. He suddenly stopped, sobbing uncontrollably in the pouring rain. A classic anime moment, really. The two brothers once shared such happy times, you know? That kid had always cherished and trusted his big bro, only to be tragically sacrificed right before his eyes. This gut-wrenching pain accidentally awakened the sleeping monster deep within Old Man Duong. Turns out, this was all a super cruel gambit by the headmaster, all designed to push Dragon King not to the absolute edge of his fury. No one saw this next-level strategic at play coming. Even though Not wasn't fully awakened and could have been easily taken out then and there, the headmaster chose to murder his brother right in front of him instead. This would force him to awaken an absolute primal rage, guaranteeing he'd return to wreak revenge on humanity and absolutely demolish every city in his path. When the night guard questioned his insane plan, the headmaster just calmly replied, his voice laced with a deep, weary helplessness. He was just utterly fed up with a life spent only fighting for over 1,000 years. His friends and comrades had all passed away one by one, leaving him as nothing but a lonely old man. And perhaps the heavens had now granted him a single, massive hope, Lu Mingfei. He saw in the boy the potential to become a sharp sword that could sever the future of the entire dragon race. His own time, after all, was running out. It was only then that the night guard finally grasped the headmaster's true intention, not to seal, but to utterly annihilate the entire dragon race. He wanted to kill the 4 great monarchs and then Nihawk himself. The reason the Academy couldn't completely eradicate a Dragon King for all these years was because every time Resurrection Day rolled around, they'd immediately sever a piece of their own body for preservation. That preserved body part contained their complete genome and all their past memories. It was their remains, their dragon cocoon. If the Dragon King was killed, that preserved body part would undergo a long transformation process to become an entirely new Dragon King. So, the only way to kill them for good was to strike before they could create their next set of preserved remains. The only way to force a Dragon King into a no-retreat scenario was to absolutely enrage them, making them bet their near-eternal life on fighting humanity to the bitter end. And only when their most beloved person was killed would they truly be pushed into a corner. Scene change. Back to the dorms because drama needs a cooldown. After reading an email from the executive board, Finger started spilling all the tea to Lu Mingfei again. He said that right after that dragon was dealt with, all the big-shot old men from the secret organization helicoptered straight down to the academy for an emergency meeting. And get this, no one has come out yet. What's more, the CC-100 transfer subway line is still continuously bringing in tons of specialists from the executive department back to school. The academy's defense system has been reinforced to the point where not even a single drop of water could sneak through. Talk about Fort Knox. After all that chatter, Finger swerved the conversation to ask Lu Mingfei if he'd chosen a club yet. He scratched his head and replied that he'd just submitted an application to the student council, mainly because Daji promised to look out for him if he joined. Finger was pretty surprised, but then just clapped him on the shoulder, congratulating his little bro for joining his club. Lu Mingfei's eyes went wide with shock. He couldn't believe this chaotic older brother was also in the student council. Suddenly, an older gentleman knocked, personally handing Lu Mingfei a powerful black card, the kind only official student council members get, the exclusive stuff. He also relayed a message from Council President Cesare, inviting Lu Mingfei to a meeting with them. And right now, Xia was also there, casually sipping tea with the headmaster. According to the headmaster, the student council would have the distinguished honor of participating in this expedition. Along with that, the headmaster had reminded Cesare to bring Lu Mingfei along, because our boy was quite useful. Cue narrator's eye roll. They only had 2 months to mentally prepare for this, which included learning how to dive underwater. Lu Mingfei heard all this and was utterly bewildered, like a bolt of lightning had just struck next to his ear. He hurriedly denied and refused, even trying to convince Cesare otherwise. He insisted he was only good at getting in people's way, let alone being dragged into some dangerous mission right after barely understanding this whole new world. Cesare wasn't having any of it, though, because he'd already seen our boy's true abilities during the recent exam and battle. Indeed, he was the S-rank elite they'd been waiting for this whole time. Lu Mingfei heard that and started trembling, his face completely deflating in despair. The organization had already prepped a glorious mission for Lu Mingfei, but our protagonist immediately shut it down without even being asked. Finger, trying to encourage him from behind, just ended up getting an earful. That's when Ling stepped out, encouraging him to join in too. To think that even someone with her notoriously chilly demeanor would actually be into silly club activities, huh? He even kindly advised her to bail, saying this kind of mission was a literal death trap. Unlike her noble goal of protecting humanity, Min-Fi was only here because of a super sweet scholarship. Cesare gritted his teeth, stood up, and dramatically declared that Min-Fi had filled him with both great anticipation and deep disappointment, asking why he didn't just drop out and erase his memories of the Faith Kingdom if he wanted to live a normal life. Min-Fi hung his head after being scolded, annoyed to the point of almost giving back his student ID. But right at that moment, the ultimate trump card appeared. She stood up for Min-Fi in front of the president, giving him the choice to stay or leave, though if he chose to leave, he only had until the end of the day. Hearing this, he lowered his head in deep thought, with countless eyes eagerly awaiting his answer. After some deliberation, Min-Fi finally agreed to participate in this little adventure. And just like that, Min-Fi was thrown into daily endurance training, leading up to their departure 2 months later. Before that, since it was his first time in actual battle gear, he spent over 15 minutes admiring himself in the mirror. Finger, feeling utterly indignant, immediately spoke up. Min-Fi replied that he just felt utterly stupid in this skin-tight, Power Ranger-esque suit, and suddenly regretted agreeing to join them. Finger then asked if his dive buddy was the senior or the blonde girl, and as expected, he sighed and replied, "Of course it's the blonde. And senior always dives with that guy, Cesare." But then Finger dropped some good news. His dive buddy was actually the senior. Because, according to the rules of the executive department, couples aren't allowed to dive together. As for Ye Sheng and Aki, that's just the world's classic pure affection trope, nothing more. I mean, they've been together forever and still haven't even confessed. That's why they're allowed to go on missions together. Suddenly, Min-Fi changed the subject, asking why Finger had been held back for 4 years, but was still allowed to stay at the academy. Hearing that, Finger immediately looked completely downcast. Everyone expected him to say something profound and noble, but nope, he just stayed in class for the good food. Min-Fi, thoroughly annoyed, started yelling curses. He cursed him, wishing that one day they'd send him on a mission and he'd kick the bucket. But before he could even finish his sentence, the guy slapped him. Finger had clearly figured out Min-Fi's biggest weakness, an absolute terror of dying. He admitted he was absolutely terrified of dying, and he was well aware of his own capabilities, so his junior wouldn't be too down in the dumps. Finger promised he'd do his absolute best to cheer on his junior from afar. Seeing Min-Fi's dismissive face, Finger began to boast that even as a mere F-rank, he could still use S-rank authority to access the Na database. "Even if it's a bit risky, my spirit will still be cheering you on, little bro." Unexpectedly, Min-Fi tossed his S-rank card to his senior. This was a powerful black card, with a credit limit of up to 100,000 credits. Truly a rare and dangerous treasure. Finger immediately lost all composure, hugging the card and dreaming of a luxurious feast tonight. While Min-Fi was still silently pondering, that guy had already called a 5-star restaurant to pre-order several dishes of gourmet seafood and mountain delicacies. The young man bitterly scolded his senior. His lines were supposed to be touching and encouraging, not this. Suddenly, Finger stopped messing around, tossed the card back to Min-Fi, and spoke serious words as if genuinely encouraging his spirit. Then he returned to his desk, typing away. Finally, Min-Fi's group boarded the ship, preparing for the Copper Plan, with Professor Men as the main commander. The chosen ones aboard this ship were, supposedly, the most elite students. Min-Fi looked around for Chu Zihuang but couldn't find him. making him nervous because they hadn't brought someone as capable as Chu Huang, but instead dragged an incompetent guy like himself along. According to the professor, the ship had been upgraded to handle any creature they might encounter, which of course meant they'd likely run into that dragon from before again. It was the dragon servant, the guardian defending Copper Ancient City. It also possessed the bloodline of the king of copper and fire, making it incredibly difficult to injure with metal or artillery. The probability Noma gave for encountering it was a super precise 1.273%, but they still needed to be cautious. And their underwater exercise during training required them to carry a special bomb. Given their current tech, there's no way they could ever get their hands on the city's true form. If this baby landed in the Dragon King's hands, that'd spell major trouble for everyone. Only now did Min Fi realize that learning to swim wasn't for saving his own skin, but more like offering it up as a sacrifice. So per the executive department's rules, Team B featuring Min Fi and Nono would stick together, while Team A, Shezzer and Zero would go full-on explosive. Just as Min Fi was about to hype her up, Nono raised her hand with a question. What if today was her special day and she couldn't get in the water? Min Fi spun around in a hurry, explaining she just had to overcome her own limits. Look at all these beautiful stars tonight. Wouldn't it be just perfect for a dive? But she stubbornly shut down the conversation, citing her Aunt Flo visiting, making a dip in the water totally out of the question. Min Fi was so helpless he practically evaporated. And just like that, the professor swapped their dryland mission, specifically for Team B, to an underwater one. Nono even made sure to tell him she wasn't on her period yet, so she could dive freely. Then she turned to the blonde girl, trying to learn her own cheerleading routine, leaving our lead character bitterly fuming. Min Fi might not have wanted to, but cornered into a no-win situation, he reluctantly donned that ridiculous diving suit. Before diving in, Min Fi quietly asked Dan Tri if they were about to run into that dragon. Dan Tri confidently stated nope, but then the professor chimed in, saying there was a high chance they'd meet the dragon's older brother, Noten. For now, though, it was probably his hibernation period. Turns out the bronze box they'd snagged was actually just a fancy urn for the Dragon King's bones. The Dragon King could originally sprout a new body from those, but Not had bolted from the scene years ago. They had no clue why, but when he escaped, he was still rocking a human form. So if he wanted to get back to his true Dragon King form, he needed a fresh new spot to hibernate. According to the original plan, they really didn't want that city becoming a nursery for Dragon King Not. Nono and Min Fi officially kicked off their mission. As they slowly descended, Nono kept a running commentary on the situation back on the ship, until they ventured a little deeper and ran straight into a door shaped like, wait for it, a human face. Min Fi pulled something from their prepared bag and casually poured it into the old face's mouth, wondering if this thing was even still alive. The very next second, Fi found his entire hand getting chomped on. He thrashed about in such terror that he actually messed with the water pressure. Nono had to pull out all the stops for a rescue effort before he could finally stabilize. Back to normal. He almost bolted at the first beat, but was foiled when Big Sis Nono grabbed his leg. It was only when he realized the wound was just a tiny scratch that he finally stopped his dramatics. Afterward, the smart, super delicate Dan Tri even bandaged his scratch up, making it look like a perfectly wrapped egg. Suddenly, from behind it, dragon scriptures echoed, and the door swung open, unleashing a massive suction force that pulled them both inside. When they finally came to, they were in a safe zone, pre-checked by Nono, naturally. But she still felt something was off. A place this sealed, with no air exchange for so long, should have been polluted ages ago, right? Nono speculated that their dear owner, Dragon King Not, might have actually returned to his palace and reactivated the architecture's functions. Min Fi and Nono slowly advanced into the Bronze City, which honestly looked like some ancient, abandoned, and probably cursed temple. Oddly enough, this time, the air felt perfectly normal. Unlike when Deep Thang and Aki were here, back then the Bronze City only had stagnant leftover air. As Nono's sharp mind deduced, the true owner of this place had returned and kickstarted the architecture's functions. Because only Not, as the actual owner, could possibly reactivate this entire city. This grim news scared Min Fi to his core, but according to the professor's calculations, Noten would definitely need a good long while to recuperate. Or, they could have just arrived way too late already. To truly demolish the city, Nono and Min Fi needed to plant bombs right in the heart of Not's inner sanctum to make sure it stuck. The professor told them to sample the water first. The water Min Fi tasted was clean, confirming the city was indeed reactivated. Because only a place with both pristine water and oxygen is perfect for a Dragon King to properly nourish his body. The professor immediately ordered Min Fi to dump their prepared bottle of dye into the water. All that clean dyed water would then flow directly towards the Dragon King's inner palace. All they had to do was follow the colorful trail. They ran towards a very familiar tree, the same one where Deep Thang and Aki had faced danger before. After another stretch, they stood frozen in awe before a gigantic bronze statue right in front of them. According to Nono's keen detective senses, they were getting super close to his royal chambers. Suddenly, she told him to seal the oxygen, then grabbed him from behind, slamming him into the lake. She then jumped in herself, dunking her little bro's head for good measure. Since the water here was flowing downwards, there had to be an exit point below. Dragon King Not would never live in a place where he was worshipped, so Nono followed the water current, aiming for a secret exit that led straight to his private chambers. Seeing him constantly muttering behind her, she snapped, turned around to share some loving words, then kept on swimming. Nono was just updating the professor on their progress when Minfi's scream suddenly sent a wave of panic through everyone. Turns out they had swum into a deep-sea graveyard, and every single body there bore telltale burn marks. It seemed highly likely they had all been burned to death. The captain also agreed with Minfi's grim assessment. Because this area hadn't always been underwater, someone had clearly launched an attack on the Dragon King's chambers ages ago, leaving behind the chilling remnants of that ancient battle. Shrugging off the gruesome scene, Nono observed for a moment, then turned to flash her little bro a sweet and gentle smile. She quickly grabbed his arm and unwrapped the bandage. Nono intended to use his blood as the key to unlock whatever lay ahead. The next second, a rogue waterspout appeared out of nowhere, engulfing them both and severing their lifeline, instantly cutting off their signal to the ship. Shazare and the professor immediately began chanting word spirit spells, desperately trying to track their location. Nono and Minfi were swept away to a truly bizarre place, the scenery utterly unlike anything she had imagined. Following a strange rotating mechanism, they crossed a bridge, only to arrive at a dilapidated house, making Minfi wonder if this Dragon King was actually broke. Nono pushed the door open, revealing a room furnished quite normally, with 2 oil lamps still burning brightly. He wondered in awe, had those things really been burning for thousands of years? Just as Nono tried to contact Noma, she realized their lifeline had indeed been severed. She calmly reassured him, "Don't worry, we just need a bit more of your blood to open this door, then we'll reconnect the lifeline upstairs, easy peasy." For now, their mission was to thoroughly check out this room. Nono carefully touched each object in the room, then her eyes landed on 2 empty spots. Unexpectedly, an image flickered into view, 2 young boys, incredibly close to each other. She quickly told Minfi to sit down in that exact spot. This was her plan. She intended to use a criminal profiling technique from forensic psychology to gather visual evidence. So, before she delved into someone else's memories, she sternly instructed him not to speak and to remember to protect her. The 2 of them began to fall into fragmented memories, revealing scenes of Not and his younger brother talking together from years ago. As she mentally replayed the actions, Minfi, also engrossed, was suddenly startled by the younger brother's call. Nono snapped back to reality, seeing 2 children who looked exactly like brothers, always by each other's side. Every single day, they spent a significant amount of time together in this very room. They'd teach each other how to write, and in winter, they'd burn a charcoal brazier to stay warm. The older brother cherished his younger sibling, yet he himself was incredibly lonely. Whenever the sun set, he would fall silent, gazing off into the distance with a profound look. Based on all this, Nono was now absolutely certain this was Not's private chambers. Even though she hadn't developed word spirit yet, her strength lay in profiling, an ability likely amplified by her bloodline. She suddenly admitted that from the very first day she met him, she had already profiled him when he effortlessly solved the map at the library's computer center. Back then, she knew he probably thought she had some issue with his S-rank evaluation. She used to think recruiting him was a mistake, which is why she had always given him such a hard time at the start. But he had stubbornly insisted on staying. So, she eventually accepted him as her younger brother. No matter what, she would protect him. After their heartfelt talk, they proceeded to plant bombs and set the timer for a casual 40-minute detonation. She almost took the oil lamps as souvenirs, but then a strange feeling of something's not right hit her. The lamp wasn't quite what she expected. There was no oil-feeding pipeline beneath it, meaning someone must have recently refilled it. Minfi, ever the innocent, wondered if the Dragon King just hired a part-time housekeeper. Both of them froze for a few seconds, a silent, dawning realization washing over them. Well, when the Dragon King is back, the 36th stratagem, which is run like hell, becomes the best option. They used every ounce of their energy, scrambling up the water wheel to reach the highest point. But when they finally made it up, there's no way it could have just washed away with a current this slow. Meaning, someone definitely took it. Nono got a seriously bad vibe as the water started shaking. Turns out the ancient bronze city was waking up. So, our duo booked it back down, only to find that area was flooded too. This scene was eerily familiar, just like what happened to Dieptong and Aki. If it's exactly the same, then the chance of another exit being further below was also a guarantee. It was a do-or-die dive to the bottom, where they found the gatekeeper, Minfi, literally using his own blood to open a gate. Back on the ship, they'd been completely out of touch for a nail-biting 15 minutes. The professor, ever the realist, felt their survival odds were rapidly dropping to zero. But Cesare wasn't having any of that, not when his precious loved one was in imminent danger. He was ready to jump in for a rescue mission, but the professor immediately shut him down with a stern lecture. Their whole point of being here was to slay the Dragon King, so a spontaneous rescue mission was off the table for now. If they were still alive, they'd have an hour and a half of oxygen, at which point the professor would grudgingly allow Cesare to go for a rescue. Meanwhile, Nano and Min Fi were busting their butts, trying everything to find an exit, but it was starting to look like they were completely lost. If only they had a lifeline, they could contact Noma and get a map. At this point, they were relying purely on a miracle or some insane plot armor to show up. In this absolute cliffhanger of a situation, Min Fi suddenly remembered a conversation he had with the kid, Min Track. He immediately yelled out for someone to open the map. And in a shocking twist, from the deep dark water, someone actually responded. It was none other than our resident tech wizard, Senior Finger. Min Fi subconsciously screamed for his senior to find a full map of the Bronze City to help them escape this watery death trap. Finger might have just been a casual B rank back home, but he still had a mountain of tasks on his plate. He skillfully typed away, fingers flying across the keyboard, all while casually chatting with Min Fi. Professor Men suddenly got a splitting headache because Finger was trying to use his very brain as a makeshift data transfer hub. Finger was scrambling, doing his absolute best to pinpoint Nano and Min Fi's exact location. With the Bronze City now in full self-destruct mode, he found a potential escape route. But unlike last time, the precise exit was now to their immediate left. He desperately tried to transmit the data to Min Fi remotely, but his measly B-rank processing power was barely cutting it, making him seriously struggle. Finger could only beg, someone, anyone, please, just give me a little more authority. Just then, the professor chimed in, just use my B-rank authority. But hold up. Turns out he didn't even need it, because the very next second, Finger accidentally hacked himself into S-rank authority instead. The professor knew Finger just blatantly hacked into the Academy's system, but punishing him wasn't exactly a top priority right now. After all that frantic struggling, Finger finally regained his swagger, casually raising his golden hand to prep Eva Norma for a direct assist, ensuring Min Fi's safe escape. Back on the ship, a red alert suddenly blared. The water temperature around them had just shot up to a scorching 50 degrees. Panic instantly rippled through the crew. Zero immediately declared that the Dragon King was officially on the move. This overgrown lizard was intentionally cranking up the heat, trying to boil them alive as part of his hunt. Even the professor's trusty vacuum snake was now completely overworked, causing him to lose control as well. The ship's chief in command was now completely incapacitated. That's when Cesare stepped up, making the bold decision to request taking over as captain, replacing the professor. He was mid-sentence, assigning tasks to everyone, when a massive tremor suddenly rocked the entire ship. Urgent news came in about the torpedo bay being on fire, but before the specialist could even finish his report, Norton's dragon servant brutally impaled him. The culprit, of course, was none other than the Dragon King himself, assaulting their ship, but no one had a clue where he actually was. The dragon servant, however, was right beneath their vessel. Cesare barked orders for the ship to shake off their pursuer. But then Zero, checking the displays, casually deduced that the one chasing them wasn't Noten, but rather, Noten was strategically waiting for them up ahead. The dragon servant was just a pawn, tasked with luring them straight into Noten's true ambush. Noten, brimming with murderous intent, stood with his hands clasped behind his back, waiting patiently. A second later, he leapt into the sea, and Cesare immediately ordered a full stop. The dragon servant, having breached the other side, was now right in front of him. Noten then lunged straight at his own dragon servant, brutally slaying it right in front of Cesare's bewildered crew, leaving them all utterly confused. But then, in a terrifying twist, he and the servant suddenly merged into one. Turns out Not didn't even bother hatching an egg. He just possessed Samsun's body, directly, probably to speed up his evil agenda. Oh no biggie, just a super strong dragon descendant he had to sacrifice. Minor details. And wouldn't you know it, Mai decided to make another cameo appearance in this mess. Her employer's instructions were clear. Just make sure Min Fi makes it out alive. As for Not, she genuinely couldn't care less if he lived or, well, bit the dust. Meanwhile, Nono and Min Fi were giving it their all, trying to swim through what looked like 10,000 giant rolling pins. They figured if they just made it to the bottom of this cursed Copper Drum City, they'd find their way out. Back at base, Finger was desperately trying to get a distress signal out to Min Fi. Nono suddenly stopped, her eyes falling on a rather unfortunate skeleton, and they instantly knew. It was Diep Tung. He had no oxygen tank, and then it clicked. That's why Aki, despite seemingly running out of air, made it to the surface. He gave her his. Min Fi, bless his heart, found it so cool, while Nano just thought, yeah, that's just how he rolls. Suddenly, Nono spotted a strange box clutched in his skeletal hand and picked it up. This had to be something Diep Tong found deep within Copper Drum City. It must have been super important for him to hold on to, but Aki couldn't carry both it and, live, so it stayed with him. Hearing them fumbling around for too long, Fingers screamed through the comms, telling them to get out. Now! With the box in hand, they said a silent goodbye to their fallen friend and moved on. They swam and swam, but the exit gate was nowhere in sight. Minfi frantically asked Nono, but even she had no clue. Panicking and thrashing against his impending doom, a hidden voice in Minfi's subconscious called him out as a coward who always pawned off responsibility and hope onto others. Unlike Diep Tong, who faced his destiny with a coolness Minfi always admired, our boy just couldn't measure up. The voice told him to look at his own 2 feet and stand on them. Back in the real world, Minfi had a revelation. Norton had probably been tracking them since they entered Copper Drum City, wanting to trap them here until they kicked the bucket for some specific nefarious reason. But hey, they had the key, so all they needed to do was find the gate this clown had locked. As if on cue, right before them was the infamous gatekeeper. Landing right into its mouth, the final step was to use Minfi's blood as the key. But his hands had been in the water for so long his blood had clotted, and he couldn't even get a drop out, not even with a diving knife. Beside him, Nono was single-handedly holding up a massive rock above their heads, trying to save both their lives. In this dire situation, seeing Nono bleeding to protect him and remembering the legendary Diep Tong, Minfi decided it was time to step up and act like a real man. He tore off his mask and bit his own hand hard, forcing out the blood. Finally, they could escape. Professor Men, meanwhile, had just finally stabilized. Cesare barked orders for the ship to get out of there. But with no weapons left to fight the Dragon King and 3 engines busted, he was sweating bullets. After escaping the Copper City, in his delirious state, Nanano had to take charge of him. From the earlier ordeal, his diving suit was completely trashed. So she had to give him her auxiliary breathing tube, which naturally meant they'd just lost half their precious oxygen supply. Without his damaged suit, Minfi's lungs would simply explode from the water pressure if he couldn't breathe for mere seconds. Since Minfi's body was weaker, Nano, being the MVP, gave him her entire diving suit. After all, she was a freediving pro, so she could hold her breath way longer than him. Just as the ship was in its direst moment, they got a call from Sir Tu Huang, who was flying in by helicopter, ready to join the Dragon King hunt. After the diving suit swap, Nano was now in just a bikini, holding her breath underwater like a true legend. She gestured for him to follow her direction, all while pushing herself to swim towards the surface. Suddenly, plumes of poisonous smoke appeared from nowhere, engulfing them. Minfi worried about Nono, who, let's be real, had zero protection now. From the ship, they deployed a diving bell, keeping the ship anchored to rescue Nono and Minfi. But of course, this would severely impact their speed. Suddenly, they got another call from Sir Tu Huang, confirming his arrival, a much-needed beacon of hope. Only Cesare found this whole thing utterly ridiculous. Seriously, how was Sir Tu Huang, no matter how strong, supposed to fight the Dragon King's fire with his own fire-based powers? Mid-rant, the ship abruptly dropped to the water. If the watertight compartment broke, the ship would definitely sink. With their weapons depleted by the dragon's minions, Cesare had an idea. He'd use a storm torpedo equipped with a super void cannon generator. These generators would envelop the entire torpedo within an ethereal cannon blast. As it approached a vacuum while moving forward, water resistance would be virtually non-existent. Plus a rocket booster, it would fly as fast as an airplane. With such immense attacking power, it would surely pierce through any living thing. This way, without even needing an explosive warhead, they could deal with the dragon. That was the theory, but they absolutely had to score a direct hit. And right now, the Dragon King was chasing them, agile as a fish. His speed was already enough to dodge the torpedo. To land a critical hit, they'd have to fire at close range, no more than 100 meters. At that distance, taking him out wouldn't even take a second. The Dragon King's merged form was massive, and the 2.7-ton metal torpedo meant he'd have no way to dodge it, nor could he melt it with his flames. Hearing Zero's calculations, which offered a chance at victory, Cesare immediately entrusted her to be the gunner under his command. Before they executed the plan, she reminded the captain that once she fired the super void cannon torpedo, it would emit an invasive noise. If he heard that sound, he shouldn't use his verbal amplification power, as it would magnify the sound exponentially. And then his eardrums would go kaboom right along with it. Despite being the commander, he wasn't arrogant at all. He listened to his subordinate's reminder. Cesare stood with a composed demeanor on the ship's exterior. Not seemed to sense the danger and stopped. From the ship's current position, quite close to Nono's group, the diving bell was still waiting at the seabed, illuminating the path for Nono and Minfi. The torpedo's ammunition had also been reloaded. To prevent any mishaps, Zero went to the manual firing room. Meanwhile, unexpectedly, Cesare, didn't listen. He used his verbal amplification and continuously fired his gun, solely to blind the Dragon King. A bullet almost pierced the Dragon King's eye, but he flicked it away. Shazar actually didn't want to harm him yet. He just wanted to infuriate the Dragon King. Dragons were easily enraged, and once provoked, he would vent his fury on Shazare. That way, the Dragon King wouldn't be able to escape. Zero reached the firing room, which had an extremely high temperature, but she bravely walked in anyway, even though the captain had warned it would explode. But just then, Shazare ordered full power, aiming the ship directly at the Dragon King at the closest possible range. Just as Not seemed to realize something and was about to flee, so Tu Huang unexpectedly arrived in a helicopter, waiting for him from above. He began chanting the Quan Diem spell, attacking Not Norton to prevent his escape. The sheer power lit up the entire sky blindingly, making it impossible for them to accurately target the Dragon King. Precisely at this moment, Shazare's blinding strategy took effect. From extreme darkness to extreme brightness, anyone's eyes would be momentarily dazed. Unless someone had closed their eyes from the very beginning, they wouldn't be able to see clearly when opening them. Following his firing instructions, she squeezed the trigger. The Dragon King, caught off guard, took the entire torpedo right in a critical spot. He screamed in pain and was flung tens of meters away. They had finally eliminated the Dragon King, but the collateral damage was too great. So Tu Huang had lost one eye's sight, and Shazare had injured both his ears. Additionally, due to the immense heat from the torpedo's launch, Zero also suffered damage to one eye. When she arrived, Shazar praised her for doing very well. Thinking he couldn't hear, she used sign language to communicate. Unexpectedly, he replied in kind and apologized for not listening to her advice. But at least, despite everything, his remaining hearing was still quite all right. Both of them were utterly surprised that the other knew sign language. Shazare had learned the language to communicate with his mother. She had passed down her verbal amplification power to him before slowly losing her own hearing. As for Zero, she learned sign language because for a time she couldn't hear others speak, and no one talked to her. Then her voice and even her language started acting super weird. So she literally had to learn this new language just to talk to herself in the mirror. Shazare patted Jiro's head and declared, "You'll be her eyes, and she will be your trigger finger." From now on, they'd tackle everything as a team. With the Dragon King incident mostly handled, everyone just hoped Nono and Min Fi could find their diving bell and surface safely. Nono and Min Fi, pushing their limits, finally spotted the diving bell. Nono quickly gestured for him to pass over his spare breathing tank. She swam to the hatch, opened it, but instead of going in, she waited for Min Fi and pushed him inside first. But as she was about to follow, Nono was suddenly brutally impaled from behind, right in front of Min Fi's horrified eyes. Even in her final moments, she didn't forget to seal the airlock, protecting her junior. Min Fi watched his senior, Nono, get murdered right before his eyes, utterly stunned. The pitiful sight of the girl in front of him tore him apart. Recalling their conversations, he broke down, weeping like a child. It was only now, in this crushing moment, that he finally accepted his own uselessness. Watching her slowly fade away filled him with despair and terror, yet all he could do was scream into the void. Min Fi's desperate screams echoed in the chamber, but then he opened his eyes, finding himself in an illusion created by Min Trak. Seeing the little punk, he wiped his tears, lay back down, and scolded Min Trak. "Can you not pull me into your dream space when I'm, busy?" Min Trak, ever the pragmatist, told him to stop wasting emotional energy. Because while he was busy dreaming, Nano's chest in the real world was literally cracking open. Nano's consciousness was slowly fading, and he was left completely alone in the diving bell at the bottom of the ocean, facing off against an ancient, high-blooded Dragon King, meaning he could kick the bucket at any second. But Min Trak, surprisingly, offered him a tiny glimmer of hope. Compared to this dream space, time in the real world outside would pass incredibly slowly. So if he hurried, he could still make it back in time to save his friend. The real question was whether he actually had the guts and power to pull it off. Min Trak naturally roasted Min Fi, calling him useless, and wondering if his big brother even had a purpose in life. "Listen up," he told him. "Maybe you can help. What if, by some random twist of fate, you also have a knack for dragon slaying?" Hearing that, Min Fi's expression instantly flipped. He rolled over and awkwardly scurried closer to Min Trak. Then Min Trak turned back and asked why he even embarked on this whole cursed path in the first place. Min Fi glumly admitted he just wanted his parents to think he had a future, but now he realized how utterly ridiculous that was. After all, he had cheated his way through the Bai exam just to pass his classes. Who even knew what qualified someone for that S rank? He'd only unlocked the ancient bronze map because Min Trak basically held his hand through it. Even back when he managed to one-shot Cesare and So Tru Huang, he was just having a full-blown mental breakdown. He never expected to become the school's resident chaos agent right after that. All of this just made Min Fi feel like a complete waste of potential. After a good session of self-loathing, Min-Fi declared he wasn't going to be useless anymore. He had to save his big sister, the one who pulled him out of his own self-pity. Seeing his brother all riled up, Min-Track was intrigued. Min-Fi bowed his head, hugging himself tightly, and muttered, "I can't let Nano just die like this." Min-Track sighed dramatically and said he could help Min-Fi, but only if they signed a contract, basically a pact with the devil. This way, Min-Track would gain the right to summon Min-Fi 4 times. Once all of Min-Fi's wishes were granted, or if he ever felt utterly alone in this world, their service contract would dissolve, and Min-Fi's life would then belong to Min-Track. Min-Fi couldn't believe his little brother was asking for such a steep price. He was a little spooked, but then he wondered, what did Min-Track even mean by if you ever feel utterly alone in this world? Min-Track explained that for that condition to trigger, Min-Fi would have to admit, out loud, that he felt utterly, hopelessly, despairingly alone, not just regular lonely. Min-Track mused that, for thousands of years, his big brother had never once agreed to anything he asked for. Yet, Nano's appearance had somehow managed to change him this much. Before sealing the deal, Min-Fi didn't forget to give his little brother a good verbal beating. What he didn't realize, though, was that this whole deal was a cunning trap laid just for him. Min-Track then proceeded to unlock each of Min-Fi's word spirits. 2 of these were short-term boosts, but one, the one he unlocked himself, was permanent. The You Cannot Die spirit. Min-Fi's core spirit ability was, in fact, You Cannot Die. Now Min-Fi finally had the power to flip this whole situation on its head. Min-Track, true to form, immediately pulled a 180, kicked his big brother butt first into the river, and then, of course, our MC snapped back to reality. Seeing the poor girl instantly triggered his latent OP power. He practically teleported to put an oxygen mask on Nono, activating his special Don't You Dare Die on Me word spirit. The whole seabed lit up with hope as our guy, without a second thought, instantly obliterated the monstrous tail that was skewering Nono. Talk about a hero entrance. Knowing the danger wasn't over, he carefully secured Nono to the diving bell's tether, trusting it to pull her to safety first. True dedication, even when facing literal death. Back on the ship, getting that unexpected signal from the diving bell sent everyone into a frenzy of relief and immediate rescue prep. Finally, some good news. With Nono finally safe and sound on deck, it was time for our hero, Min-Fi, to square up against the legendary Dragon King, not himself. Let the boss battle begin. The only problem? All the fancy word spirits his older brother Min-Track had given him were 0% offensive. Classic overpowered but with a handicap trope. Min-Track, being the smug older brother he is, just casually mentioned he didn't need to give Min-Fi any because he already possessed them. Peak sibling energy. Turns out, the real power was in his hands all along, the mysterious box that Yisheng had conveniently found. Inside, 7 legendary alchemy weapons, forged in the ancient Nort era, each one a literal game-ender. Talk about a surprise gift. See, this particular Dragon King was basically the embodiment of pure wrath. He blamed the downfall of the dragon race on the 7 deadly sins themselves, channeling his rage into creating 7 distinct weapons, each designed to judge and punish one of those very sins, each with its own absurdly specific power, naturally. So against this guy, the Dragon King of Wrath, using the Wrath weapon was clearly the optimal strategy. Logical. First move, Min-Fi strategically used his firepower to seal away the Dragon King's word spirit, turning this into a good old-fashioned brawl between warriors, no magic allowed. With the Dragon King distracted, Min-Fi tried to summon Wrath, but plot twist, he couldn't get it to activate. Classic MC moment. Instead, our guy accidentally summoned the weapons for gluttony, arrogance, and lust. Just another day in the life of an accidentally overpowered hero. Not exactly ideal, but hey, if they combined, he could probably make it work. When life gives you accidental sin weapons, you make sin aid. And just like that, they clashed. A truly epic battle where both sides were perfectly matched in skill and absurdity. Faced with ultimate danger, Min-Fi transformed, becoming even more powerful and decisive. He went from cozy farmer to absolute combat beast in seconds. Right now, the Dragon King Not and Min-Fi were locked in a perfectly balanced, nail-biting standoff. But here's the catch. If this fight dragged on, our human MC's stamina was definitely going to hit 0. Dragons, being immortal, literally don't understand the concept of getting tired. Talk about an unfair advantage. Min-Fi knew this underwater disappearing act was just the Dragon King setting up for an even more devastating, probably world-ending attack. Suddenly, our MC glanced up at the endless crushing water above him, feeling the terrifying lonely silence of the deep, a true moment of introspection. He was hit with a truly dark thought. If he just bit the dust here, how many people would really mourn him? Talk about a mood killer. Everyone would just move on, find new joy, and time would eventually erase all memories. Deep. Except, maybe his brother Min-Track would be really sad. Who else would stay up late eating snacks and bothering him now? The true tragedy. Just as he was spiraling, Min-Track, his ever-so-helpful brother, suddenly appeared, offering words of comfort that were dripping with sarcasm, seeing our MC at his most vulnerable. That devious younger brother was clearly thinking, If Min Fi gives up on the world, wouldn't that be a massive win for me? Shady, but kinda genius. Min Track started sweet-talking him, practically begging his older brother to just loudly say the words, "I despair already," so they could seal some sketchy soul-bargaining contract. Classic little brother move. But nope, Min Fi instantly pulled a U-turn, scolding his brother like crazy. "Dude, I haven't even gotten a single romance under my belt yet. Priorities, people. For the sake of all the future waifus who are destined to fall for me, I have to survive. I'm gonna personally kick this Dragon King's butt and make a name for myself. Our harem magnate has spoken." Seeing that fire of determination blaze back in Min Fi's eyes, Min Track smirked triumphantly and conveniently spilled the beans on Dragon King Not's ultimate, fatal weakness. Turns out the Dragon King's true human form was literally hiding on top of his own giant dragon head. Classic fantasy boss battle logic. Without a moment's hesitation, Min Fi chanted the Liam Ru word spirit, amplifying his hearing to pinpoint the exact location of his hidden enemy. The moment he locked onto the target, he shredded through the water, confronting the Dragon King's true form face to face. But the familiar face staring back at him made our hero freeze dead in his tracks. Uh-oh. It was none other than Old Tang. Dun dun dun! Min Fi's heart shattered, wanting to scream and ask if his trusted friend still recognized him through all the draconic madness. But all he got back was a pair of cold, soulless eyes, because Old Tang had officially zero human memories left. This is rough, folks. Just that one moment of emotional vulnerability was enough for Min Fi to drop his guard, leaving him wide open for the Dragon King's brutal counterattack. In that literal split second between life and death, Min Track provided a crucial assist from behind, using Min Fi's hand to land the fatal blow. Talk about brotherly teamwork. All Min Fi could do was close his eyes, summoning his last ounce of strength to thrust the blade through Old Tang's vital point. This is going to hurt. Watching the person who was once like a brother, who he'd faced life and death with, fall by his own hand, Min Fi felt a soul-crushing agony, like he'd just lost his closest family. Heavy stuff. In his final moments, Old Tang's eyes were still wide, fixed on Min Fi, before slowly closing and sinking into the dark, murky depths. But deep down, Min Fi knew that look wasn't one of blame. Old Tang was just trying to catch one last glimpse of the open sky. Bittersweet, right? Meanwhile, back on the ship, Nono had been pulled aboard, and everyone was frantically trying to stabilize her. Talk about multitasking during a crisis. Her pulse was barely there, her breathing faint, causing everyone's hearts to collectively stop. The tension was palpable. But then, like a literal miracle, Nono winced, slowly opened her eyes, shattering the suffocating tension with a wave of joyous cheers from everyone. Waifu saved. In a classic, meanwhile, moment, Min Fi finally broke the surface, but he was floating dozens of meters away from the ship, alone. Our hero, who had literally just saved the world, was completely alone and adrift in the vast ocean, and not a single soul on the ship even noticed him. Talk about a thankless job. Just as our boy was completely spent, flailing in the icy waters, Lin Zero casually popped up out of nowhere to lend a hand, leaving Min Fi totally stunned. Just when they thought it was all over, from her vantage point, Mai spotted the Dragon King's shadow, still barely clinging to life. Even after getting hit by a storm torpedo and a critical strike from Min Fi, his will and life force were still ridiculously tenacious, like a leech that just won't let go. Not wanting to leave any loose ends, Mai pulled out her ultimate weapon, coldly unleashing hell to eradicate this threat for good. Mission accomplished, she calmly called her boss to report back. Min Fi had successfully escaped the jaws of death, and Dragon King Not had officially kicked the bucket. Mission complete, our boy Min Fi, looking like a mummy wrapped head to toe in bandages, was summoned to Principal Andu's office. He smiled, congratulating our hero for absolutely acing his exam with the first perfect score in the entire history of the internship program. Then, the principal casually handed him a post-internship essay assignment on a topic so brain-numbingly complex, it instantly gave him a headache: the paradox of the four great monarchs. Hearing this topic, absolutely reeking of ancient brain-melting philosophy, Min Fi broke out in a cold sweat, terrified he wouldn't be able to string two words together. The principal slowly explained, actually the four great monarchs were personally created by Black King Ni Hawk, with a total of 8 dragon kings, and get this, each throne is ruled by a pair of twins. He basically used this twin mechanism as a cosmic failsafe. If one twin sacrificed themselves, there was always a backup version ready to step in and maintain power. The principal then slid a photo across the desk towards Min Fi. He explained that the Dragon King appeared before him in human form because humans are, easily swayed by empathy for their own kind. And get this, Old Dung's real name was Ronald Dung. His foster parents passed away, he grew up on social welfare, dropped out of high school, lived in a low-income slum, and struggled to earn every single penny. But, plot twist, he still secretly donated to the orphanage where he grew up. That's also why Old Dungern was always complaining about being dirt poor and miserable. In reality, the principal had thoroughly reviewed Old Dungern's entire file even before the operation started. But get this, knowing he was Min Fi's internet buddy, he ruthlessly kept all that info hidden. According to ancient records from the Ice Sea ruins, the brothers Nat and Constantin originally resided in the Bronzethal Palace in the far north, but then at some unknown point, they decided to casually migrate to the Tinquoc continent. Before they were obliterated in the distant past, they managed to whip up a bronze jar that acted as a genetic cocoon, preserving their essence to regenerate brand new bodies. Many years later, the older brother was the first to burst out of the cocoon, but alas, he couldn't recover his memories. Old Durin's current appearance was that of a fresh 20-year-old, but his actual age was a mind-bogglingly enormous number. Unsure of what cosmic ups and downs he endured, he eventually drifted to America and once again found himself adopted. There, he lived for over 20 years embracing his human identity, gradually becoming so convinced that he truly was a human, he forgot he was a literal ancient dragon. That is until the day his younger brother Constantin awakened, and typically a dragon king cannot be fully definitively killed. But this time was different. Nott hadn't even had a chance to craft a new bronze cocoon for himself. Instead, he directly merged with the dragon servant to force an immediate colossal transformation. He did this all to gain the power to unleash the strongest bamboo dragon forbidden spell of the fire spirit system. If he had succeeded, the number of fallen would have piled up into literal mountains. He hated humanity to the very marrow of his bones, and it was all because of Constantin. That foolish younger brother, in a desperate attempt to protect Norton, actively broke his own cocoon, sacrificing himself first. That's why Nott was willing to go to such extreme lengths, defying all costs, just to avenge his brother. The principal gently comforted Min Fi, explaining that even without the Constantine incident, that creature calling itself Nott would have permanently stopped being his friend Old Duong anyway. Any human emotions were to them simply a burdensome weakness. Despite the intense pain of staring at the photo of his once-close brother, Min Fi finally gritted his teeth and returned it to the principal. To further soothe our suffering from success hero, the principal then handed him a letter. The moment he saw the handwriting, he instantly recognized it. A letter from his mother. In the letter, his mother praised his outstanding achievements. She blamed herself for not fully performing her duties as a mother, but expressed hope that in the future, he would understand why she had to leave him. She was incredibly proud to see Min Fi grow so strong and promised their family would officially reunite on the very day he graduated from Casso Academy. After he finished reading the letter, the principal suddenly lowered his voice, instructing him to keep the details of this entire operation strictly confidential. According to Nono's official report, Shazari was the one who fired the storm torpedo that finally finished off the Dragon King. But according to Nono's actual account, she was then dragged underwater and attacked by an enemy she suspected was a dragon. The shrewd principal then pointed out the glaring absurdities. Who exactly attacked Nono? And why was a complete rookie like Min Fi able to escape completely unharmed? And how could Nono's fatal wound heal so miraculously fast? Our boy Min Fi instantly broke out in a cold sweat. There was no way he could honestly admit he sold his soul and made a literal deal with devils to save Nono, right? He was just about to open his mouth and spin a tall tale when the principal raised a hand to stop him. No matter the truth, your teacher has always put his full trust in you, so I won't press for details. Back at the dorm, Finger couldn't help but gush with admiration after hearing our boy just had private afternoon tea with the principal. But our unbothered Min Fi wasn't flexing on that privilege. What really boiled his blood was that damn article some clown just posted on the Academy forum. The photo editing was so bad it made the rich heartthrob look like a regal, majestic king, while Min Fi was utterly trashed, looking like a decaying Egyptian mummy. Finger scratched his head in defense. Well, when you've got money, that's just the vibe you naturally give off, right? You, on the other hand, gotta embrace your inner country boy to truly stand out. Min Fi, seething, rolled up his sleeves, ready to give his bro a beatdown when a knock came at the door. He stormed out, ready to pick a fight, only to open the door and be greeted by the pampered face of Shazare, the local prince. Min Fi's fighting spirit instantly deflated, his bravado fizzling out like a flat soda. Shazare, completely unbothered, acted like he owned the place and casually asked for some sugar for his cooking. Min Fi and Finger gawked, mouths agape. The student council president, who usually spends money like water, is now broke, crashing in the dorms, and personally cooking. What in the world? Curious, the two bros poked their heads into the hallway and were utterly flabbergasted to see not just Cesare, but also Sotru Huang, living in peaceful harmony with him, both stirring and sautéing away. That's when Finger finally got the full scoop on the drama, explaining the reason behind this earth-shattering event. The dorms just had a new allocation, and the room across the hall now welcomed two adorable new lovely ladies, Totian and Min Fi's beloved senior Nono. Today happened to be White Day, and the girls wanted to throw a party, so the two rich boys had humbled themselves to help out in the kitchen. While eagerly gossiping, Finger suddenly ambushed Min Fi, asking if he'd ever received chocolate from a girl. Min Fi rolled his eyes, looking embarrassed and scoffed. Who'd want that? Unexpectedly, Nono gracefully appeared from nowhere, pushing open her door with a smile, saying, "Then how about I give you one, little junior?" Seeing this, Finger immediately got greedy and begged for a share. The moment Nono mentioned there was a whole pile of chocolate in her room, he threw all dignity out the window and sprinted on all fours into the girl's room to mooch. At this point, only the two of them remained at the door. Nono gently thanked Min Fi for what happened under the sea. She explained that it was his heartfelt call from the depths of his soul that pulled her back. Without that call, she might have slept forever, never to awaken again. Though always cold on the surface, Nono truly cherished this junior whom she had personally chosen. After thanking him, she hinted at inviting him to her room to share some pizza. Hearing the invitation, Min Fi's mouth watered, but he reluctantly had to refuse, as the principal's thesis deadline was still looming over his head. Returning to his room, Min Fi unexpectedly received a mysterious package from overseas. Opening his phone, he got an ambiguous message, "My dearest brother." He immediately recognized the mischievous tone of that little devil, Lot Min Trek. The message was a thank you for Min Fi's perfectly synchronized cooperation in eliminating the Dragon King, but the accompanying gaze in the attached picture radiated an unsettling, abnormal vibe. After reading the message, Min Fi felt chills down his spine, wanting to just toss the phone away and be done with it, but then remembered his utterly broke state. If he threw it, where would the money for a new one come from? So he gritted his teeth and stuffed it back into his pocket. Meanwhile, in his quiet office, Principal Andu flipped over the painting of the two brothers to look at the back. His aged eyes narrowed, and he softly uttered four enigmatic words, "Long time no see." Then, with a chilling demeanor, he lit a match and burned the picture to ash, as if he had subtly grasped the gravity of a major game that was about to unfold.